obviously the purpose of this is a fundraiser for a museum. And it's a military museum in Altoona. What we're trying to do is educate the young people is the main purpose. We want to educate them about the sacrifices made for the freedom of this country. Okay, if you think about like Iwo Jima, we were in Iwo Jima, the battle was 36 days. There was 26,000 American casualties, 6,800 were killed in that 36 days. We've had so many of our soldiers killed in combat. And not only that, when you think about it, they come back with physical disabilities, mental disabilities, and on top of that, we have a high suicide rate for soldiers that come back from combat. So all these are sacrifices being made for our freedom, and it seems like a lot of young people have no clue. And to me, like I said earlier, this room should be full, and it's not. So I do want to make a number of acknowledgments. Jeff Long, who's standing in the back there, talking to Blaine Smith. Jeff, obviously, this museum wouldn't be happening really if it wasn't for Jeff. With his help, remodeling the building and everything, he's been such a help for us at this museum. Also, the Sheets family with their financial contributions have been a major help. How many Vietnam veterans do we have? Stand up if you served in Vietnam. Please stand up and be recognized. Welcome home. My brother served in Vietnam. He did 2 tours. He was a combat engineer in the Marine Corps. Then he spent 27 years in the Marine Corps. His welcome home wasn't very positive. So like a lot of Vietnam veterans. And we want to welcome you home. We do have a Gold Star family here. Chad Emerson, his parents are here, and they lost their son in combat. And so please stand to be recognized. So again, that just shows you we do have their sacrifices being made for our freedom, and we want to make sure the young people start learning about that. That's the whole purpose of this museum. Also, if you look at the program booklet there, and everybody comes tonight's going to get a program booklet, but we only had so many. We figured we'd put one on the table, and that way you can look through it. But basically, we want to thank all the corporate sponsors. There were 35 of them. And without them, this wouldn't be here. And you wouldn't be paying only $50 for a ticket for lunch and dinner. So keep that in mind, thanks to the corporate sponsors. Also, we have a lot of, in the placement there, you see the placement there? We're going to have those here tonight too, but it's a couple on the tables. That's showing you all the donors, all the people that volunteer. We have so many volunteers today, and we can't thank them enough. I want to thank Jolie Cover. She's the one that did, she did all the work out there on the silent auction. And I want to thank Sean Derez. I want to thank my friend Travis Altos. They all donate all these military things, pictures, photographs, baseballs, all kinds of stuff. But you're going to see so much stuff there you've never seen before in Blair County at a fundraiser. It's just amazing what she did, Jolie Cover. And also, she did all the decorations on the tables also. And also, her sister is the one that did the flags up here. So again, thanks to the Cover family, it looks great. Back here in the back is fundraising activities. Okay, we're a nonprofit. We're 501c3. Okay, we have a gun raffle. Hey, pick that gun up again. Show them the gun. Let's go. Look at that baby. A Golden Boy, 22 long rifle, $20 a ticket. Only 100 tickets. That's how much of a chance you have to get a Golden Boy. Okay, and we have 50-50 back here, and also over here. You want to get up in the middle there is where you're gonna get the silent auction. Okay, so sign up for the silent auction. Okay, later on we also have T-shirts for sale. Hey Tom, show them those T-shirts. Show the back of it. Look at the T-shirts. $25 for a T-shirt. Look at the back of it. 2050. Huh? 250 years of America. 1776 to 2026. Huh? I graduated high school in 1976. 50 years. 50 years ago I graduated high school. 50 years later, now we're talking about 250 years. Back then, it was only 200 years. So, and again, we have the speakers when they're done. They're giving a lobby, and they have books for sale. Bill Robinson and Mel Pender, and then Rocky Blair will be here for lunch, and then Rocky Blair's going to be out there from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. to sign books. he's going to bring books. And when you buy a book from Rocky Blair, the proceeds go to the museum. So keep that in mind. And again, he's going to have a number of books out there to sign. You can meet Rocky, get a picture with him, and he'll sign a book for you. We also have a number of vendor tables here, back here in the corner there. All these vendor tables, okay? So keep that in mind. Go back and look at the vendor tables. And I can't thank all the volunteers enough, all the people that contributed. And again, it's overwhelming for me. The support I've received for this museum has just been overwhelming. So, and again, I truly mean that. I want to introduce Bill, which I've known Bill for a number of years. We talk on the phone quite a bit, and so I got to know him pretty well. But again, Bill is a retired captain from the Air Force. But Bill will tell you his story, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but he was the longest serving enlisted prisoner of war in American history, over 7.5 years as a prisoner of war. So let's give Bill Robinson a warm, alternate welcome.
Good morning. Beautiful day in paradise. I used to have a friend that met the guards every morning. He'd just say, "Good morning, dipstick. Looks like a beautiful day for bombing." Now, to try to set the tone for the day of my experience, I used the titles of books that were written by other prisoners of war. The titles of these books could also apply to the men and women who were in Vietnam when hell was in session. Courage under fire, in the presence of my enemy. They wouldn't let me die. The long road home. But the most of all, a simple book called Return with Honor. You know, I like to start off, I'm a little southern boy from eastern North Carolina, a little cotton mill town. When I became of age, my grandfather took me out to the cotton mill where he worked. Over in the cotton mill was a big plexiglass wall, and behind it, to me as a 9 or 10-year-old, was just name after name after name. Right next to it was a beautiful American flag. As I stood there, eyed at what I was seeing, not quite understanding, my grandfather finally broke the silence and told me, when our country came under attack in 1941, these are the folks that raised their right hand and said, "Take me. I want to defend America." They were high school students that forgot their last day in school or last year in school, and some of them came back after the war and completed their education. There were mill workers. There were just all kinds of people of all walks of life. Many of them my grandfather knew. As we talked about the different ones, my father's name, my uncle's name, and some of my senior cousins were on that wall. As we talked about the different ones, I remember my neighbor, Rufus. I never knew why Rufus had a limp, but I just thought that, he'd born that way, never thought that he lost his knee in a combat acting in Europe. But Rufus went on every day as though life was normal for him. As we looked at names and talked about different other people, I noticed that some of the names had stars beside them. I asked my grandfather, I said, "What does that star stand for?" Kind of with a lump in his throat and a tear in his eyes, he said, "They're the ones that made the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms we enjoy today." As I looked at that wall, and the next thing you know, I'm fast forwarding to Vietnam, paying homage to the lost war, the Korean War. So many that never have heard of the Korean War. It's just one of those things that faded in history rather quickly. But we had over 7,100 prisoners of war, and over 2,500 of them died in captivity. We have a wall for the Vietnam veterans that has over 58,000 names of those who didn't come home. They were the stars of my generation. I like to break it down and make it aware of the cost of war. 39,000 of those names on that wall were 22 years of age or younger. 36,000 were 19 years or younger. As I was noticing yesterday at school, they're starting the end and graduation and things like that. It's been going all over the country. Many of our young people are sitting there discussing their senior trip. Many of those who went to Vietnam was their senior trip. These are the heroes that we so often forget. For those of you who are military oriented, I think that my approach, this next comment is recruiters, weathermen, politicians, and used car salesmen had all graduated from the same school. You know, just like just like present day, they give you a line of little BS and you move on. Mine sent me to Lackland with one change of underwear, and the Air Force was on a 4-day vacation. So we might have been a spaley bunch. From there, I went to complete the second phase of basic training. I went to Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. From there, I went to my first duty station, Altus, Oklahoma. From there, I went from Altus, Oklahoma to Osan, Korea. Well, I had been asked at one time in my career to fill out a dream sheet, and that's the dream sheet is where you'd like to go next. And so thinking about when I graduated from basic training, when they asked me where I wanted to go to Alaska. And so when I volunteered for Alaska, I ended up in Altus, Oklahoma. So when I was in Korea, I had the same opportunity to fill out one of those dream sheets, and so I just put anywhere USA, and I found out that'll get you to the chief's office pretty quick. That's when I learned when all the dust is cleared, there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. I went back and once my assignment, I volunteered for my base of choice in North Carolina, which is near my home. The state of choice is Florida, and the area of choice southeast, and I ended up in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Once I got there, they said, "Oh, by the way, did you get the word?" I said, "What's that word?" They said, "Well, our detachment is closing. You'd like to think about where you'd like to go from here." At that point, I had 3 years in the service, and I said, "Well, I'll just go to the house." And they said, "No, that's not a good idea. We got another deal for you." Next thing I know, I was on a volunteer list for Indochina, or Southeast Asia. And you notice I didn't use the word Vietnam because Vietnam did not exist in the American vocabulary well after 65. We just referred to it as Indochina. We had fell into the same trap. The French had gone into Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and just called it Indochina. They divided Vietnam up into 3 sections, and Cambodia is one other section and Laos is the other. And so they had essentially 5 provinces being run by the French. If we look at our enemies in Vietnam, our worst enemy was the French. Because the Vietnamese were able to tell the people that the Americans were going to do the same thing to them that the French had done for the last 100 years. And so it made it difficult for us to spread this thing we call freedom. I went over not knowing exactly what my job was because everything was a QT, but it turned out we were actually establishing rescue. You see, at the end of the Korean War, rescue was just became non-existent. They didn't think there was going to be any need for it because of the way things would be going in the future. So all of a sudden we don't have a vehicle, you might say, an airplane. We took what we call an LBR airplane, which stands for Local Base Rescue, and made it into a combat airplane with a piece of quarter-inch steel under the co-pilot seat, and we sat on our World War II flak vest in the back. We were ready to go to war. We were ready to do our part. We were going to make sure that every pilot had the opportunity to come home if possible. We discovered we didn't have the fuel range we needed, so we created the first in-flight refueling in helicopters. Essentially was a 55-gallon barrel, 2 quick disconnection of garden hose. But we had a mission to do, and as most of you know that's ever been in the military, you always get the mission before you get the equipment. So you have to make what you have do the job. And so we started flying that way, and in an unofficial Air Force history, I get credit for 3 bombing runs over North Vietnam with a 55-gallon barrel. Because as a crew member, my responsibility was once we burn off enough fuel, we'd pour it into the main tank, retrieve the quick disconnection of the garden hose, and kick the barrel out. So it was a part of just the mission. We were scheduled at that time for a 3-month TDY. So I went over in April of 1965, thinking I would come back in July. When July arrived, they said that you had been extended. And we asked how long, and they said, we don't know. Well, at about the same time we received the new, which now is labeled a Jolly Green Giant airplane. As most of you know, when you get a new piece of equipment, it doesn't always work according to Hoyle. So next thing you know, we were extended for the duration as they worked with their issues, and so we continued our operation, and we were prepared to go home when they were able to take and do the complete mission. You might say we flew side by side, and when they weren't able to go, we could go, and vice versa. 20th of September 1965 was one of those days. They had aircraft problems, and so we were designated on this one mission. The problem being that we had no real guidance. We were still trying to write the book on how to do this. And everything essentially was being controlled or out of control from Washington. We had the things we couldn't get airborne until they had contacted the pilot. And what does that take? That takes time. Then they had to verify the pilot. That takes time. And so from the time we were notified that there was a pilot down, it was 3 hours before we were airborne. That's 3 precious hours we needed. Unfortunately, they didn't wait on the other side to start looking 3 hours later. They were already looking for the downed pilot before we were ever even airborne. So we knew we were going to be flying into hostile territory, and that was just the way it was going to be. We flew in at 10,000 feet, and then we dropped down to the lower level. Of course, we homed right in on the pilot, and in just the moments after we broke through the soup and the clearing, we were on the hillside, or he was on the hillside, and we were above him. We had a hoist that we used that we dropped from the airplane because we couldn't land, and the hoist is 100 feet long, and I'm holding red cable, meant I had at least 90 feet below the airplane. When I couldn't reach the pilot, we had to move over and come down further and then swing it over to him. And by the time he got it, you might say all hell broke loose. The A-1s that were supporting us, they took rocket fire, took fire, and it hit one of the rocket pods. The last transmission I heard over the radio was unauthorized disposal of your ordnance of the local area. That's how managed it was in North Vietnam at that particular time. Needless to say, when he peeled off to dispose of his ordnance, those people that had been waiting for us to be there because they knew we were coming. They opened fire, and the next thing you know, we took hits. Fortunate for us, because we were below the hill level, they were shooting down at us, and above us was the engine, the transmission, the rotor blades, and everything, all the metal, all the heavy metal of that airplane was above us. And they took the hits rather than us. It's a frightening moment when your life passes in front of your face as you see bullet holes appear in the side of the airplane, and you see daylight through those little bullet holes. We fell about 90 feet. Fortunate for us, we didn't fall on solid ground. We chopped bamboo for quite a ways, and when the airplane, it was heavy enough, it settled in the bamboo, and we were probably about 2 feet off the ground, and with bamboo going through the bottom of the airplane. Fortunate for us, it didn't roll one way or the other, and we were able to extract ourselves from the airplane. The rules of engagement was that we had to get away from the airplane as quickly as possible, because they were going to come up in 30 minutes and blow it up so that nothing on the airplane fell in enemy hands. And so we were evacuating the area. Realized at broad daylight, probably 2:30 in the afternoon, 3 o'clock, we ended up getting about a half a mile, and we realized that we couldn't travel during the day, so we sought hiding and said we'll wait for darkness. Our dream at that point was to get into a local area and travel at night, and eventually, hopefully, find a clearing somewhere where we could set up an SOS or whatever and be extracted. But that wasn't to be. As we lay down waiting, we could hear the voices of the Vietnamese, and they got closer and louder. And eventually they identified, they knew who we were. And I can remember my pilot looking at myself and Airman Black and saying, "Live to fight another day." We had a little 6-shooter. We could have probably took out 4, 5, 6 of them. Of a 250, that wouldn't have bothered them at all. But our life would have been over. So we were taken into captivity at that point. We were marched down the hillside and eventually arrived at a little hamlet. And at first, curiosity seekers came up to see. You see, it wasn't like we could blend into the neighborhood, because we were a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier, so we just didn't have that slang, you might say, to be there. As they just wandered around and looked at us and poked us like you poke a bear, and next thing you know, a blowhorn shows up. And when they got done speaking, those people that turned against us, next thing to go, the people were just beating the hell out of us just because we were Americans. The guards were trying to get us out of that situation, and we went from that situation to, again, another hamlet. And it repeated itself over and over again as we were put on static display and beaten just because we were Americans. This went on for a day or two, and next thing you know, one morning, sometime around 11 o'clock in the morning when the sun is fairly high, they came in and got me out of the little makeshift cell I was in. My hands are tied together behind me, my back, at my wrist and my elbows. My feet are tied together, and I'm wearing a blindfold. We jokingly call it the Hanover Shuffle. They left enough room in the rope that we could probably move a foot at the time, and the 2 guards, one under each armpit, kind of shuffled me out. As I was going out, I could lean back and I see that a crowd had gathered, and I wondered what was going on. As soon as I was in place, they knelt me down, and I was looking at a freshly dug grave. At that point, I felt that my life was over. I was just 22 days past my 22nd birthday, and the end. As I looked down in that freshly dug grave, I knew it was over. As the guard started speaking in Vietnamese, all I could imagine was their findings and their commitment to justice, you might say, and the final outcome was going to be my execution. You know, I think about that time, and I jokingly say that if Al Gore can invent the internet, I could invent, and I invented speed dial, because me and the good Lord, we were having some conversations. And I don't know, to me, it was my first, I won't say my first miracle, but it was in there, because I honestly thought that I would never see my 23rd birthday, as I waited for that shot to be fired. Next thing I know, something was said, and I was lifted up by they were standing behind me with their weapons pointed at the back of my head. You could see from the shadows in front of me. But the next thing I know, they lowered their weapons and one on each arm, and they took me back to the makeshift prison cell that I was living in. And I was convinced from that point on that I was going to survive. I didn't know how, under what circumstances, but the good Lord has said to me, I've got something else for you to do. Counter in a couple of days, I was, in a no-nonsense way, I was turned over to the regular military, and next thing you know, I was being transported north to Hanoi, which was a 7-day trip, you might say. And we traveled by any means, method. We walked, we rode in the back of a car, we rode in the back of a truck, a boat, whatever. One experience that they had, the rules of engagement was that if you came up from a truck, and as long as it was on the road, you could shoot at it. But if the truck pulled off the side of the road, you weren't allowed to shoot at it. Well, evidently the Vietnamese driver didn't get that word, because when we got jumped by a couple of our airplanes, they jumped out of the airplane and left us. Jumped out of the truck and left us sitting in the middle of the road. And I'm certainly pleased to the fact that these guys were not Top Guns, because they strafed the truck 3 times and missed it. And they run out of fuel or ammunition or whatever, and luckily we survived that. But we did come under fire several different times. But again, once they pulled off the road, they weren't allowed to shoot at it. So that was kind of a hidden blessing, you might say. We eventually arrived in Hanoi, and when we got within about a block of what we now know as the Hanoi Hilton, the guards pulled our blindfold off, and one of them said, "Home." And of course, my mental thought was San Francisco, but his thought was Hanoi Hilton. So we were about 12,000 miles apart in our thinking. Eventually, we pulled up to the front gate after we looked at the 25-foot high walls with the broken glass and concertina wire along the way. And once we went through the doors and we were standing inside, I was standing there with my pilot. The pilot, we were trying to rescue the other airman and myself. You notice I didn't mention our co-pilot. Our co-pilot, he got separated from us with all the chaos that was going on. And we didn't learn until later that he had been captured by the Laotians, that he had made it out of Vietnam back into Laos. And unfortunately, he was in a prison camp in Laos, and they thought they were going to get overrun, and they all escaped. And unfortunately, he experienced 2 weeks of freedom before they finally were overcome, and he was captured and executed by the enemy. That is depicted in the movie Rescue Dawn, if anybody's ever seen that. That was my co-pilot. We were taken into the Hilton, and I didn't see my pilot and the pilot we were trying to rescue for 7 years. We went through the compounds in separate routes, you might say. I was taken back to what we referred to as New Guy Village. It was a small cell that was probably less than 6 feet wide, had a bed that was about 4.5 feet long, about 16 inches wide, more designed for a Vietnamese, and a bucket at the end of the bed. And that was my first accommodations at the Hanoi Hilton. As I kind of nestled into what I figured would be a long haul, you know, your mind plays, I don't say plays tricks on you, but it gives you positive thoughts. And I said, well, maybe negotiations going on. I'll be traded for 10 Vietnamese or whatever. I'll be going home soon. And these were the kind of the thought processes that goes through your mind. Fortunate for us, the Vietnamese wore loud sandals. When they would walk through the hallways, you could hear the flip-flop as they moved about. No more than I'd been locked in the room, and that sound of that flip-flops stopped. A voice rang out to me, identifying himself as Colonel Robinson Reisner, the senior prisoner of war at that time. And his first words to me as a 22-year-old airman was, "Be prepared to die for your country." That was the furthest thing from my mind at that particular point. We were interrupted several different times, and then eventually he told me, if we survive, we must return home with honor. I think that we leaned on the heroes of World War II in Korea. We knew there were a number of guys that had been prisoners of war in both wars, and we knew there was casualties of prisoners of war. But each of us felt like that we could be that one that could survive. And fortunate for us, leaning on their strength, proving from them that you could survive under difficult circumstances, played a key role in our survival. Eventually, I was moved from from the New Guy Village to Heartbreak. Heartbreak was the bad guy cells where we were beaten and abused just because we were Americans. As I stood there in that simple cell, they shoved it through the little peephole, a short shirt, a long shirt, short pants, long pants, much like pajamas with a drawstring, a bar of soap, tube of toothpaste, toothbrush, a hand towel, a mosquito net, and a blanket, and a metal cup. As I looked at those things laying on my bed, little did I would believe that they would be my worldly possessions for the next 8 Thanksgivings, 8 Christmases, and 8 New Years that I would ring in captivity. They eventually brought and gave us a pair of shoes. They were cut from the sidewall of an old car tire, with the straps that held them on being made from the inner tube, which many people don't know even existed at that time. But that's what they gave us to get us up off the floor. Most of us spent anywhere from 6 to 8 months in solitary confinement, and eventually some spent over 4 years in solitary confinement. The motivation was the new guys, when they would arrive in the prison camp, we'd ask them how the war was going. They said, "Can't last 3 more months. We'll be out of here before Christmas." And so you might say that was our battle cry, just hang in there. I asked a friend of mine years later, I said, "You remember when you showed up in the prison camp and we asked you how the war was going, and you said it couldn't last 3 more months and we'd be home for Christmas?" He said, "Yeah, Robbie, but I didn't tell you which Christmas." Probably the most difficult thing is in 1966, January 66, Robert McNamara took to the airways and announced to the world that the prisoners of war were expendable. With our kind of a sense of humor, we thought it was humorous, but our families didn't like it at all. Could you imagine how Mom felt when that country said her son was expendable? A wife, a child. So Robert McNamara, being the skilled man he was, he's noted for building the Edsel, and Ford still made money, so he was a polished individual. He went back out and said that wasn't what he meant. What he meant was he was trying to get the pressure off us so the Vietnamese would leave us alone and let us be held as prisoners of war. But unfortunately, what he was really trying to do was get us off the front pages of the newspaper. Not only did he get us off the front pages of the newspaper, we ended up not even making the press at all. So the press cooperated with them as they sold us bill of goods to the Americans. We adopted the simple things that we every day. You never give up, you never give in, you roll with the punches, you bounce back, you get ready for the next round. This is how we survived on a daily basis. I said we survived on 4 faiths. Faith in ourselves, that we had the tools to get the job done. Faith in each other, that we would stand shoulder to shoulder and eventually someday we would return home with honor. But most of all, faith in our country, that it would not abandon us under difficult circumstances, and that our God would never give up on us. When I think about heroes, I don't think about myself. I think about the families that carry the burden. Can you imagine a mom having to get up every morning? She puts on her smiley face and tells the kids that everything is okay. Daddy's coming home soon. When she gets them off to school, she lays her head in her hands and weeps, thinking, have I lied to my children? And that's the burden she lived with. I had one family member, her son came home from school one day and said, Mom, is my dad a bad man? And of course she responded with no, he was a good man. But once things had calmed down and they had had dinner together, she took her son aside and asked him, so where did this come from? He said, well, today in school, my teacher called me up to the front of the class and pointed me out and said that my dad was an evil man, that he had committed crimes, and that eventually someday he would be tried and he may be executed for his crimes. He just simply said, Mom, is my daddy a bad man? She, along with her friends, on the things she could do, she moved to distant locations and forbid her children to even mention their father. She took the burden of protecting them as a mother should do. These are the kind of things that families dealt with. We had family that had difficulties, but eventually they pooled together. The International Red Cross tried to send care packages to us in North Vietnam, but because the Vietnamese would not honor the Geneva Convention, they withdrew any efforts to accommodate and live by that convention. The American Red Cross did send packages to us, and when they were found on dead North Vietnamese soldiers in South Vietnam, they ceased sending packages. Eventually, the Vietnamese allowed our families to send packages. The problem was that less than 25% of the prisoners of war had been identified. They were still being listed as missing in action as far as the Vietnamese would not identify they were prisoners of war. So when those packages came, they just used them for the self, and a few people, including myself, received a package from my family. They were started out as a 6-pound package, and by the time we received it, it was probably anywhere around a pound. It was simple things like bacon bits, bouillon cubes, coffee, tea, Kool-Aid, a t-shirt, a handkerchief, something. I can remember a friend of mine sitting there one day and holding a pack of Kool-Aid. And you said, well, damn, it's just a pack of Kool-Aid. But no, it was the first contact he had had with his family in over 4 years through a little small care package that was sent to him by his family. These were some of the things we did. And one of the picture boxes I received, which was small, was some photos. And those photos, of course, I went through and identified. And the important thing was not to change expression. You just went through, and as I went through, I explained each one. Next thing I saw a picture that I didn't recognize, but all of a sudden, not missing a beat, identified them as distant cousins and, explained their life history. And when I got back, I shared them with my roommates. And they said, that's so-and-so's wife and kids. And so that was one of the first times we had acknowledged that our families were together back home. Each one of the states and the senior prisoner of war family member had gathered other members throughout the state. And you might say they played together, cried together, and prayed together as they waited for their loved ones to come home. I know that this day, if I'd have walked in there with that photo and $1 million in one hand and that photo, I know which one Jim would have taken. That's how much it meant to us to know that our families, you might say, were leaning on each other for strength to carry them through difficult circumstances. I went out in the briar patch and was out there where we had no running water and electricity for about 15 months, and then our health started to fail, and they thought we were going to lose us, so they brought us back to what I recognized as civilization, and I never realized that just considering running water and electricity as civilization, but it made a difference in our life. Shortly after we came back, they moved us out of semi-solitary and solitary confinement into larger groups. And of course, we were always looking for that sign, and that sign was that we were so spastic, they just put us together so we'd be prepared to go home. Shortly after that, President Johnson announced the stopping of the bombing of North Vietnam. And we were delighted in thinking that an end was near. We didn't realize until later it was a political ploy. Not only did it not serve us well, because as a result of that motivation, that one guy coming in saying it can't last 3 more months was over. We didn't have any contact with the outside world for 3 years. We found out that Neil Armstrong had walked on the moon on the back of a little sugar pack. And maybe some of you are old enough to remember when you went to a restaurant, there was a little tidbit of history on the back of a sugar pack in the restaurant, and and someone had sent that, and that's when we found out that Neil Armstrong had walked on the moon. The most positive sign after the election was over, the Vietnamese were out the next day digging foxholes. It motivated us that something was said during the election and that we believed that President Nixon would eventually become after us. But unfortunately, when he took office, he discovered there was no standing army in South Vietnam. For Johnson had disarmed the Vietnamese army, and America and her allies were doing all the fighting in Vietnam. So before he could do anything, he had to rebuild the Vietnamese army. And essentially, over the next few years, as they stood up, we stood down. You see, it was LBJ that said, I'm not going to send American boys to do what Asian boys should do for themselves. And in less than 3 years, had over 600,000 troops in the combat zone. President Nixon sought to bring them down. One of his advisors told him there was a prison camp called Son Tay. And he said, there's about 63 Americans out there that we could bring home if we did it properly. President Nixon put his go-ahead on that experience. As a result of that, they set up a mock prison camp at Eglin Air Force Base, and they trained for 6 months. Bull Simons, Tiny Allahope, they trained their men, and when they were ready, they were given the go. And on the 20th of November 1970, the Son Tay raid happened. They basically crash landed a helicopter in the middle of the compound, using it as a surprise element. broke a hole in the wall, brought in reinforcements, and in a matter of 3 minutes, they secured the area. And they were brokenhearted when they were found no Americans. The briar patch and the Sante were much alike, and the conditions had been so bad that the prisoners had been moved out. And we had quit flying reconnaissance missions over it not to draw any attention to it, so therefore we weren't aware that men had been moved out just days before. They gathered themselves, got together, and pulled out of the compound, thinking what a failure they were being. It was only 2 years later that we could embrace them and say what they had done for us. As a result of that label of expendable had been replaced by high value. The Hanoi Hilton, which we were only using 15 to 20% of, at that time, we used it more as a processing center. They came in and whitewashed it, moved all the political prisoners, all the other prisoners, and the female prisoners all in this compound, and we all moved in. The guys that moved into a cell with 40 to 50 guys. Can you imagine walking out of solitary confinement and staying with 39 to 49 new Americans that you knew existed, but you had never had any real contact with? This is what they done for us. They take our life from hell to a livable hell. When the Vietnamese tried to reestablish their control, you might say, they walked in and said they identified their leader of the room. And I saw my military at its finest as a senior ranking officer stood up and said, "No, I'm in charge." When he dragged them out, the next one stood up. In some rooms went 4 and 5 deep. Each time the next senior ranking officer stood up and took his position as leader. And we won our first major battle. As a result of that, probably 30 or 40 guys that would have survived another 2 years of the conditions we were living under got to come home and live out their life with their families. You might say a short version of POW life could be described as minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and even years of boredom punctuated by terror. It brings about the story of a friend of mine, Mike Christensen. He came from humble beginnings in Alabama, but he remembered in all his life there was always an American flag in his home in some position of honor. And he said there was no flag in North Vietnam. Mike took it upon himself. He gathered material from wherever he could. He took clay tiles and cigarette ashes, you might say, and he started making the different colors he wanted with other ingredients. He took strips of cloth. In the back of that long sleeve shirt I mentioned, he donned the first American flag. Using a stick that he had found on the ground, sharpened it on the concrete floor, and made a needle, and taking string from his blanket, he donned that flag in the back of his shirt. Eventually, when he completed the flag, Senator McCain was in the room. There was a room next to me, and he described the moment as these guys, when Mike unfurled that flag, and they all stood at attention, and as they recited the Pledge of Allegiance, they became taller and straighter. Mike would secure that flag during the day so the Vietnamese couldn't find it. Then at night, he would put it on display where the only ones in the room could see it. The word spread and other flags were being built or made sewn in different areas, prison rooms. And so eventually we all had flags in our rooms. But they came in one day and they found Mike's flag and they went absolutely ballistic. Mike, being the person he was, he went charging to the front of the room, identified himself as the maker of the flag, and eventually He caught a rifle butt across the back of the head, and as he fell forward in front of his roommates, they moved forward to assist Mike. The Vietnamese locked and loaded and grabbed Mike by his feet and drug him out of the room. They beat Mike nearly to death. We could hear the moans as he went through and the pain that he went through and the suffering he went through just because he wanted to share an American flag with his brothers. Eventually he was drugged back in feet first, just like he was taken out, and dumped in front of his roommates. There's what not to do. Mike eventually started to recover. McCain referred to the moment the only thing they had was a washcloth, water, and prayer. And they slowly nursed Mike back to health. One day, Mike sat up in the middle of his bed with a grin from ear to ear as he announced to his roommates, time of flag number 2. You never give up, you never give in, you roll with the punches, you bounce back. You get ready for the next round. I said by early December 1972, President Nixon, his staff, his leaders in the armed forces had gained control again of Vietnam. And again, as they stood up, we stood down. You see, when I went over in Vietnam in 1965, there was less than 20,000 combat troops. And by now, we were down to less than 20,000 combat troops again, as we were preparing for complete withdrawal from Vietnam. The only issue to settle was the prisoner of war issue. The Vietnamese said, oh, go on to the house, we'll take care of that later. The president said, no, we'll take care of it now. Well, we knew that there were French prisoners that had been captured in Dien Bien Phu in 1954. And in fact, they were still being held, and in fact, they did not get released until 1979. President Nixon or our armed forces would not allow that to happen. I have had Vietnam veterans said all we wanted to do was come get you. When it became a fight or argument about your release, they came to me with tears in their eyes and all we wanted to do was go get you. But our government wouldn't let us. But President Nixon, when they got up and walked away to the peace table, he unleashed what is referred to as linebacker 2. In a period of 11 days, we dropped more bombs than has ever been dropped in the history of mankind. Not to advance a war, but to secure the freedoms of some 591 Americans being held in captivity in North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. As a result of that, the Vietnamese came back to the table. And I think about that night on the 18th of December 1973. I think about a young man named Walter Ferguson. He already had his retirement papers in, and he could have went back to the States, but he said, I've got this much invested into the war. I want to see my brothers come home. I didn't know Walter, but I looked up his and my history. It turned out that he and I had been at Altus, Oklahoma together back in 1962. You know, I'd never met him. I saw his airplane take off and he probably saw mine, but not knowing that 10 years later, he would have given his life for the freedoms that I enjoy today. Yes, during that period of time of 11 days, we lost several guys. They gave up their tomorrows so we could have ours. Eventually, the Vietnamese called a truce on the 26th of January. At the same time it was being signed by President Nixon at 12 noon, it was being read to us in the late hours in Vietnam that freedom was just around the corner. When that was signed, The Freedom Day was listed as 12 February 1973. Starting on that date, all the prisoners of war and an incremental release would be released, along with all combat troops. And on the 29th of March, which is now recognized as Vietnam Veterans Day, the last prisoners of war and the last combat troops would be removed from Vietnam. A friend of mine, when we reached those gates, and someone asked him, said, could you define freedom? And he simply said, doors with inside knobs. Think of the opportunities that we have each day simply because we can walk up to a door, turn a knob, and venture to the other side. In my particular case, there was no doorknob for 2,703 days. We were dispersed back to the United States. I had the opportunity to celebrate Valentine's Day of 1973 in the Philippines, Guam, Hawaii, and San Francisco. And flew in the wee hours of the morning, landing at Scott Air Force Base, and eventually landed at Andrews, where I would get my physical and be prepared to return to active duty. To me, as I look back on those moments, I think the saddest moments to me is when we forgave those who ran before we as a nation stood up and said thank you to those who served. You see, I was allowed to wear my uniform home. My brothers that stood up early, when they reached America's shores, normally in the night, they were ushered into a bathroom to remove their uniform so as not to offend anyone. They did not get a proper welcome home. They were not treated like heroes. The hero's welcome that they gave me belonged to them. So let's give them one more hand. In terms of losses, we had over 300,000 permanent injury. As I mentioned, over 58,000 dead. 20,000 kids grew up without a father. Me personally, only 1 out of 5 air crew members shot down over Southeast Asia survived. So I can truly say I'm one of the luckiest men alive. My generation, unfortunately, we could not separate the word war and warrior. In their mind, if the war was bad, the warrior was bad. And that stood because no one stood up for us. But when our sons and daughters, nieces, nephews, the kids from down the street, when they were called into Iraq, when they came home, the same group, the Kennedys, the Fondas, and the Carries, took to the airways to criticize our young men and women in uniform. It was a Vietnam veteran who stood up and said, hell no, not again. As a result of that, we as a nation have learned to separate the word war from warrior. You can have whatever feelings you want to about the war, but you'll have only one feeling about the young men and women wearing the uniform of our country today. They're serving us with honor and dignity. They are our heroes, and they deserve everything that we need to forgive them. They, and the motto of the Vietnam Veterans of America is simply that never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. And we continue to honor those who wear the uniforms of our country. In closing, I will share with you the words of a friend of mine who long since passed in the Air Force. He said, we flew west. But during my years of captivity, one idea dominated my thinking. How fortunate I am to be an American. I have seen the other side. I have had every real and imaginative fault of the United States of America pointed out to me time and time again by my captors. But I have returned with a strong conviction. Although we are far from perfect, our system excels all others on earth, and our basic ideas and principles are honorable and just. His last paragraph was speaking to the young men and women that cover the air, the land, and the sea, when he simply said, I have faith that we will continue to work for a peaceful world and freedom while firmly resisting those who enslaved mankind. That's the responsibility that we now place on our 18 to 20-year-olds. They're out serving us, defending our nation, defending our way of life, and standing strong throughout the world. So we thank those who continue to fight, who fill the shoes of the heroes of the past as they prepare for the heroes of the day and pave the way for the heroes of tomorrow that will wear the uniforms of our nation. Ronald Reagan once said, some people spend an entire lifetime wondering if they made a difference. Our armed forces doesn't have that problem. A friend of mine, a World War II prisoner of war, gave me a bumper sticker that I proudly display, and it just simply says, only two defining forces ever offered to die for you: Jesus Christ and the American soldier. One for your soul and the other for your freedom. You know, in this great land of ours, some people dream the dream. Some people live the dream. Our armed forces defend that dream. God bless the defenders of the dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for your great service to our country, and thank you for telling your story. What do you think, huh? Another round of applause for... Now, let's all stand in honor of the POWs that served in Vietnam, and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. What a great country you live in, huh? The best in the world. I know I'm going to say this a lot, but again, 20 years ago, this room would have been full. It would have been. And that's what's wrong with all society in America. We're losing it. We're losing it. Our young people are losing it. They don't realize the sacrifices that were made for our freedom. We need to change that. We really do. We need to work together to change that. I do want to talk about the fundraising. I got to keep doing that. They'll be, yelling at me back here. But Joey Cover, obviously, I'm telling you, you can't believe this silent auction. It's the best there's ever been in a fundraiser in Blair County. I can tell you right now. I don't care what anybody tells you. I'm telling you right now. It's there. Also, we have Teresa McConnell back here. We're doing a 50-50. We're doing a gun rifle. Hey, get that gun up again. Pull that gun up. Come on. Look at that. Look at that gun there, huh? Or Henry Golden Boy, huh? 22 long rifle. Mag. It's a Magnum, all right? Hey, Tom, pull up the T-shirts there. $25 a T-shirt. Look at the back of it. 250. 250 years of America, 1776 to 2026. We're raising money Let's get out, get your wallets out. Hey, this is just a good cause. It's a museum. We're gonna teach our young people the sacrifices made for this great country. Okay, this is what this is all about. Now I want to introduce the next speaker. Great story. Captain Mel Pender retired from the Army, and again he was a Vietnam veteran, but he also was an Olympic gold medalist in 1968 in a 4-man relay race. So let's give Mel a warm Altoona welcome. Let's go.
I'm slow. I used to be fast. We'll wait. Okay.
No, wait. Make sure you tell them how old you are too, Mel, when you get up here. Make sure you do that.
Thank you very much. I tell you, I am so proud to be here, Dave. I met him in D.C. at the American Valor, where I got an award, which I was so proud of. We live in the greatest country in the world. I grew up in a little town in Dalton, Georgia. But before I go into my little presentation about my life, I want to say something about a great friend of mine I just met and doing wonders for me, my wife and I, for our foundation. He's sitting here today. I didn't know he was coming. He told me he was coming, but I didn't believe he was coming. He drove all the way from Virginia. A retired colonel, doctor. I tell you, I just, I don't know how to say this, but he has done wonders for Deb and I. Dr. Curry, could you please stand up, please? Retired Air Force, retired colonel. If you go outside and you see the children's book of me, which I look so good on it, you have to buy the book. It's really beautiful. He's doing books for many athletes, track and field, and other sports, NFL, so on and so forth. But my book was the first book that he did, and I am so proud. He's on my board, my foundation board. That my wife and I, we raised money to help kids get scholarships for school. He also putting together a leadership program that I am so proud of. I mean, he sent me the information about that before I left the other day, about the leadership program, not only just for kids, for corporations around the world. I would say the world. How a leader's supposed to how a leader's supposed to be. Now, this cap I'm wearing, I got it on because I'm proud of it. It says, "We give it hell, sir." In Vietnam, we all gave it hell. I tell you, I'm so proud to be an American. I'm proud to be a Black American. I've always been patriotic as a kid. But some days I would say, why? The things I grew up that I had to endure as a kid being Black was heartbreaking. But God, I went to church every day, from Sunday school to noon service to BTU. Everybody know about BTU, Bible study, during the day. But at 7 years old, living in a little town called Dalton, Georgia, which is the corporate center of the world now. It used to be the bedspread center of the world. But Dalton, Georgia was a little town near Chattanooga, Tennessee. And in that town, it was really kind of different as a kid. A lot of things I couldn't understand. And I would say, why? Because back then, Blacks had to go in the back to go to a movie. We had to get the ticket in the front and go into the alley to go up to that balcony to watch a movie. My father went in the Navy in 1942. He was a cook on a submarine. And I used to go to the movie just to see if I could see my father on the newsreel, because we didn't have TVs back then. I never saw a Black soldier in the newsreel. But the movie that I saw that really made me the person that I am today is a movie called To Hell and Back. Who remember that movie? Audie Murphy. All right, I see the hands. That little guy is reason you see this little guy standing here, because he's the same stature that I am today. I want to be just like him. I want to be Audie Murphy. I want to be just like him. I want to win the medals. I want to fight in the war. I had a cousin that joined the Army when he was 16 years old, retired as a sergeant major. No, I'm sorry, command sergeant major. I want to be like him. But living in that little town, one day, I was 7 years old, and I was crossing the railroad tracks, and this troop train stopped. And these soldiers on this train, but they had the white troops on the front, and the jeeps and the trucks and the guns, and behind that was the black troops. And I went home and I asked my mother, I said, why? I said, aren't we fighting the same war? She said, yeah. She didn't know how to explain that to me. But I just, as a kid, it was a thing that I didn't understand why we had to be separate. Because we're all God's children. God made us all to bleed one color, that's red. No matter what color you are, what religion you are. We fight wars together. Together we win. If we're not together, we don't win. And when I was in Vietnam, I didn't have one black soldier in my unit. They were all white young kids, 18 to 22 years old. They were my sons. They were my kids. I loved them like my own. They loved me. I was an enlisted man for 11 years because I was a staff sergeant before I went to OCS. And I knew what it was about, how to lead, how to be a leader, how to lead my troops. I knew the things that I had to do to get them home. I know I had to be a father like a father to them to bring them home safe. But before I get into that, before I get into the Vietnam part of it, in 1950, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia with my grandparents. And the school in Dalton was really nice, but when we got to Atlanta, we lived in Decatur. And the school that black kids had to go to was unbelievable. We had to get a taxi to school because the county wouldn't give us a bus. And the school was awful, had 13 rooms and had first through the 12th grade. And my mother was in a club called a sewing club, and they raised money to build a school in our neighborhood. And they built a school, a little concrete building with 13 rooms, concrete floors, a little potbelly stove in the corner, an outdoor toilet about 100 meters from the school. I would say, why? But right around the corner, there was this beautiful school for all the white kids. I just couldn't believe that people had to live that way because we all God's children. I'm a Christian, and I love everybody in this room, no matter what color you are, what religion you are. But my grandfather told me, be all you can be, never hate. He said, God made us all the same, no matter what color you are, he said. But you have to be better than the person next to you because everybody's competing for the same thing you're competing for. I say this because being a black man, it's still people supposed to not stand back and speak their mind. I'm a Christian, and I love all people. When I was in Vietnam, I fought for not black people. I fought for all American people because we all bleed one color. But what happened was that movie, Audie Murphy, it stayed on my heart. So when I was 17, I joined the Army. I joined the Army not knowing what to say and what to put on my paperwork when I joined, because I was doing construction work, digging footings. They call them footings, not foundations back then, for houses. And I was driving trucks for the drugstore, working at service stations. I had a young wife that was pregnant. At 16, I was married. I know I had to take care of my wife and my child. That happens back in those days. And I joined the Army. When I joined the Army, when I was 17, I knew that I had to make a life for my family. But I didn't fight the system. I used the system in the military. I knew I had to do well to help to make my family survive because it wasn't tough getting a good job. If you didn't have a college degree, you wasn't going to get a good job. So I used the system in the Army. And when I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, couldn't believe the things that I was able to do. I was good in everything there. I set a record in the PT test. I set a record in the 50-yard dash. I didn't know I could even run then. And I got a 3-day pass. And my little girl, my wife, my little baby came to visit me in Fort Jackson. So God was blessing me. I knew God was doing something for me. And then I was sent to England. When I went to England, there was a program called Skywolf. We would be building, all the airstrip was built by the Germans. There was 3 bases there. I was at Stansted. And Stansted now is a civilian airport. I helped build that airstrip. We were working 12 to 15 hours a day building this airstrip. And we were working for the Air Force. We got paid twice a month. Couldn't believe that. But we lived in Quonset huts. And it's unbelievable. That wasn't the kind of military assignment I wanted. But I didn't fight the system, because every time I was on guard duty, I made supernumerary. You know what that is? You know what that is, guys? Supernumerary. That was the sharpest thing. So I didn't have to walk guard duty. So I could go back and go to sleep. And then I started driving for the construction foreman. I kept his truck 3/4 ton so clean he couldn't believe it. I put sandbags for floor mats in the truck. But then I started driving for the company commander. I didn't fight the system. I used it. Then I started driving for the colonel, for the battalion commander, because I didn't want to do that hard work driving those 5-ton trucks, delivering concrete, building concrete for the runways for the airstrips. So I was really good. I used the system. I stayed 18 months and I returned, and I re-enlisted. That's when I went 82nd Airborne. I'm sorry to wear my hat, but I want you to see what it says up there. In Vietnam, we gave it hell. And 82nd Airborne really changed my life. I went to jump school at Fort Bragg in 1958. I was 19. And at Fort Bragg, I was beating everybody in a lot of things that push-up. They call me Push-Up Johnny. I could do more push-ups than anybody in my battalion, in my company. And then I was sent to Okinawa. Before the Vietnam War was getting started, they sent the 503rd to Okinawa. In Okinawa, I played football. I was the fastest guy on the football team. And the football coach came out and said, the Japanese is coming over from Japan, Osaka, Japan. They're training for the 1964 Olympic Games. I said, why are you talking to me about that? He says, we want you to run the 100 meters. I said, what is that? Because I never went track in my life. I didn't know what track was. Because the school we went to didn't have a track team. We didn't have a football team. We didn't have a basketball team. We only had a school, and we had great teachers. But he said, go down to the supply room and get some equipment. I said, what are you talking about equipment? He says, track shoes. I said, what is track shoes? He said, I didn't know what track shoes was. So I picked up some track shoes. They had shoestrings about that long in them. They were black, just spikes about that long. You guys know what I'm talking about, the old guys. And he said, I'll pick you up and take you down to Nago, northern end of the island. When I get to Nago, the whole island was there. It had to be at least 10,000 people. I mean, there was no place for these people to sit. And I said, what the hell have I got myself into? He said, just watch the Japanese. Whatever the Japanese runners do, you do. I said, okay. He said, well, you know how to stretch. You're playing football. I said, yeah. So I watched the Japanese. Got in there, dug me 2 holes in the ground, and the gun went off. I said, oh, hell, I better go now. They were about 25 yards in front of me, and I caught them. I won. I ran 11.2 in 100 meters. That was my first race in track and field. I was 25 years old. I never went track in my life. So that, after winning the 102.20, the winners was given 7 days R&R in Yokohama. So I went to Yokohama, Japan, and we saw the structures coming up in Tokyo, also in Tokyo and Yokohama. The 1964 Olympics was coming. So I said, I'm coming back to the Olympics. I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But I was going to get out of the Army because I had colleges after me. UCLA, Southern Cal, Fresno State, San Jose State, all wanted me to get out of the Army because I ran 9.5 and 100 on grass back then. I didn't know what that was either. So I had a wife and a baby. I was going to go to college. I said, I'm not smart enough to go to college. So I re-enlisted. They sent me to 101st Airborne Division. I'm sorry. Yeah, 101st, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was there about 9 months, and they sent me to Korea. In Korea, I played football. Again, I was at Weijambu. Anybody know about Weijambu? Anybody ever been to Weijambu? I was at Weijambu, and they flew a helicopter, picked me up, brought me back. And this was headquarters. I mean, it was a great assignment. I was signed to the service club. All I had to do was make sure they had entertainment every weekend. So all I did was play football. And a buddy of mine came to me one day and said, look, the military is looking for runners to train for the Olympic Games. And I said, okay, I'm going to put your name in. I said, all right. So he put my name in, and I was sent back to 82nd Airborne Division, given 2 hours a day to train. And I'm telling you, they put me, I got promoted to staff sergeant in supply. I had no idea about supply. Back then, they would promote you anything. If you were good, they'd put you in anything and promote you. And I was in supply. So I was given 2 hours a day to train. And this supply sergeant, the command sergeant that was in charge didn't like me because I was an athlete. I was given hell. I came to work one day, I was assigned to an artillery unit as supply sergeant. I said, what is going on here? So I called Washington, and Washington put me in, said, you better put him in special service and leave him alone. So they put me in special service, and I went to training camps, and I was beating all these college students. These college athletes have been running track all their life, even when they were a kid. I was beating them. I didn't know what was going on. What am I doing? Where did I get this talent from? I didn't know. But some of the guys that went to school at Florida A&M, went to Tennessee State University, San Jose State, was in the Army because they joined the Army to run track. And they helped me. They really showed me the ropes, how to run track. And I was beating them. They were showing me how to run, and I was beating them. So when I came back for my first Olympic Games, I didn't win a medal. I got hurt. I played 6 in the 100 meters, and I couldn't run the relay. So I said, well, I was 27 years old, and I said, my track days are over. So I said, I'm going to OCS. So I went to OCS, passed the test, didn't know I was that smart. Went to OCS, and out of 130 in my class, I felt like 13th in my class. Then I was sent to the 9th Division, Fort Riley, Kansas. That's when it all started, my first Vietnam tour. And Vietnam, I had 13 men, only 13 men in my platoon. Not one black kid. I had one black kid in my platoon at Fort Riley. He was 17. He couldn't go to Vietnam. But I had a bunch of young men that was my kids. And one day when I came off of patrol, and we had got hit in that night really bad. One kid was wounded. And this captain said, you're going back to Fort Riley, Kansas. I said, for what? He said, well, you're going to Fort Riley, Kansas. I knew what it was. I didn't want to act like I knew what it was. But anyway, that night I was playing poker with the officers, and Colonel Chamberlain came to and said, Mel, you're going to be in my office tomorrow at 7:30. I said, why? He said, be in my office. He didn't tell me. So he told me, and I said, I'm not going. He said, what do you say? I said, I'm not going. I'm not leaving my men. I train these men. I'm responsible for these men. These young men who was 18 to 22 years old. I'm sorry. But he said, you have to be at headquarters at 8 o'clock. And the general said, told the general, I didn't want to go. I get choked up talking about that. But he said, Mel, I can't keep you here. You got to go. And so I went back to my platoon, and I told him, I said, I'm sorry. I gotta go. And so I'm gonna wear a gold medal for you. And God bless me. I went back. I was beating everybody, setting world records. And I made the Olympic team in 1968. I was 27 years old, one of the oldest sprinters in the history of track and field to do that. But before I went to the Olympics, when I came back after OCS, I came back from Olympic. I went to the next year. I wanted to go to helicopter school. I took all the tests, passed all the physical. And when I came back in the 1968 Olympics, they said, we don't have orders on you. You got to go back to Vietnam. We need captains. Wasn't any captains in the 9th Division. In fact, I was getting ready to be a company commander as second lieutenant in the 9th Division because we didn't have captains. That's one reason I didn't want to leave either. But when I got back, before my guards, I said, you got to go back to Vietnam. We need captains. And I said, I'm not going. He said, you got to go. They got to go again. And I'm not going. But they said, well, you need command time. So they sent me to 82nd Airborne Division for 6 months back to Vietnam and come to command 82nd Airborne. I was 82nd Airborne for 4 months. They rotated back there with Ambassador Kobe. Ambassador Kobe became CIA director after he got back. I was flying all over the place. I had one engine prop, flying in the hamlets. I was everywhere. But one day, after 9 months, I get orders to go back to the United States to train for my 3rd Olympic Games. My 3rd Olympic Games at 33 years old. Why would they send me? I was number 2 in the world in 100 meters. But God blessed me to get out of Vietnam, but not being wounded or whatever. But when I went back I was signed to West Point Military Academy. One of the greatest assignments a guy could ever get. I was a track coach and I was teaching. And at West Point, I learned so much about officers, young officers in the United States Army, our leaders. And I thought I taught them so much about life. I even hear from them today. They still tell me what I did for them as a young man. And I told them about being an enlisted man. I said, you have to listen to your NCOs. I said, they make you a better person. They make you a good officer. They know more than you do. And I've gone back to West Point a couple of times as a speaker. And I tell them the same thing, the young men there, the same thing. Listen to your NCOs. They can make you or break you. But if you don't listen to them, you won't be successful. But anyway, the long story short, when they sent me back before I went over my second tour, I didn't tell you that. I was sent back to 82nd Airborne Division as a company commander. And my company was the best company in that division. Not bragging, just damn good, y'all. My company was the best company in that division. Every inspection we won. On the sidewalk, when you walk in my company, you saw 101st Airborne, 187th. You saw another airborne unit, I can't remember. And then when you walk in my door, you would see, we give it hell, sir. My company was the best company in that division. And my battalion commander was Colonel Malcolm from Macon, Georgia. In fact, he came to my book signing in Atlanta when my wife wrote my autobiography. There's some out there for sale. By the way, this is my lovely wife, Debbie. Can you stand up, baby? That's my angel. God sent her to me. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for that lady right there. But Colonel Malcolm stood up and said some great things about me as an officer. And I was so proud to hear the words that came out of his mouth. But I knew I was good. But the words came out of his mouth made me feel so good in front of 300 people that came to my book signing. It was unbelievable. Then I came back at West Point. I set world records in the 50-yard dash, the 60-yard dash, and the 70-yard dash at age 36 years old. Unbelievable. Nobody's ran as fast as me. I ran the 40 and 4 flat. Y'all better clap. I ran the 40 and 4 flat. I ran the 50 and 5 flat. I ran the 6 and 5.8. And I ran the 70 and 6.8. That was yards because they don't run them anymore. I ran 100 meters in 10 and 9 and 9.9 and 100 yards in 9.1. World record in the relay in Mexico City at 38.2 seconds. I ran one of the fastest legs. I ran the second leg on that relay team. I won that gold medal for my men in Vietnam. I won that medal for my men. And clap, y'all. Bill, I want to say to you, sir, you're my hero. The words that I heard that came out of your mouth and the things you had to endure as a young man for 7 years is amazing. America, we don't honor our veterans the way we should. War is hell. We can sit here and tell you stories about things that we've gone through, protected our company, our country. And together, as I say, as people, we are a one people. And together, we are winners. I'm a Christian. My wife is a minister. And believe it or not, I met her in a church parking lot. Just got back from Africa. She's in England doing missionary work. It's unbelievable how I shook her head. She was the only white woman in church. The only white woman there. I said, what the hell is she doing in my church? But I said, who is she? And I looked at her and I saw those pretty eyes and her legs. I said, I got to meet this lady. But anyway, the minister introduced me to her. We shook hands, and unbelievable, we could not turn our hands loose. It was God. It was God. We could not turn our hands loose. We was holding hands there. And 1 year later, we were married. Going on 20 years now. Somebody clap. I want to close now. Well, let me say this. We have children. We have beautiful children. We both have 2 girls and a boy. We have 1 son that's in China right now teaching. I have 2 great grandbabies. And most of our kids went to school. It's a blessing. They'd all got college degrees. And we're blessed to have kids that love their parents. And it's tough raising kids today. Our children's book out there. It's why we started our foundation back called the Gathering of Eagles Foundation. In 1996, I was working for the Atlanta Hawks. I was president of the Atlanta Hawks Foundation, director of community affairs. And my wife and I, one night, I woke up one morning, I said, we got to restart our foundation to help kids with scholarship for schools. And now we have this leadership program that the Dr. Colonel Curry has started. And it won't only be in schools, it'll be in corporations too. So I'm so glad to have you here, sir. Thank you very much. And I thank you. And God bless America. And God bless the world. Because we are great. We live in the greatest country in the world. There's no country like America. And I love this country. Now I'm going to do everything I can. And I'm 88 years old. I look good, don't I? You got to clap. Yeah, I'm 88 and I got a young wife, so I better live a little bit longer.
Doing something right.
I don't know about now, but I used to. But thank you so much. And God bless America and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel, for your service to our great country, and thank you for telling us your story. Now, again, I know you're going to hear me all day and all night talking about all the fundraising, but I got to because we need money for this museum. We're starting this museum from scratch. Back here, Joey Cover put together one hell of a silent auction. Nothing you've ever seen in Blair County. I'm telling you, there's stuff back, you've never seen anything like it before. And I want to thank my friend Sean Derez. Where's Sean at? He's probably,
Here behind you.
oh, there's Sean.
Got your back. Nobody's sneaking up on you here.
I'm happy about that. Sean donated one heck of a collection from Iwo Jima. Think about it. If you buy this collection of stuff, you're going to get a flag that was flown on Iwo Jima. You're going to get an autographed picture and a hat from Woody Williams, who was a Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima. You're going to get, what else are you going to get? Sean.
Autographed picture of Lieutenant General Larry Snowden.
Larry Snowden, who was a combat veteran of Iwo Jima.
There's a sake set from the Reunion of Honor. The Emperor of Japan has one of those. We only made about 40 of them.
So there you got a sake set.
There's World War II beer bottles that we found on the battlefields in Saipan and Coke bottle.
Look at that, huh? That's a hell of a collection. All that in one big pile up there at the silent auction. Okay? So again, and where's Travis? Donated all these photographs and all these, there's baseball, there's everything over here. And these are all war heroes. Okay? Autographed pictures of war heroes over here. So get out your wallet. Sign right in the middle here. You sign up for the silent auction. You'll get it, okay? Now we have the great Teresa McConnell from my office. Teresa, where's your hand? 50-50 back here. 50-50. Get that gun up. Bill Scott, look at that gun, huh? Get that gun. Henry, Gold Boy. $20, 20 bucks. Get your $20 on and get a ticket. You might win that. We're going to sell only 100 tickets, all right? And we're selling T-shirts. There's nobody there. We're selling T-shirts, $25 each, okay? Now, also pretty soon, we're going to do some RIP tickets too. So we're going to do that. We're going to do everything. We're going to make money on this at this event. Now, my next speaker, who I have known for years because we've been involved with different groups together, is John Powell. Is a retired lieutenant colonel from the Marine Corps. He's a Marine, okay? Army, that's right. I always do that, don't I? And I'm Army myself. I can't believe it. I keep thinking you're a Marine. Huh? Yeah, my kid was Army too. I know. My son was Army. 5 years, my son did infantry in the Army. Yeah, I know. We're all Army, and I keep thinking he's a Marine. That's because most of Iwo Jima is mostly Marines. That's why. That's my excuse. But anyways, he got awarded 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses for flying combat missions in Vietnam in a helicopter. So he has one hell of a story to tell you. So let's give a warm out and a welcome for Lieutenant Colonel retired John Powell.
That's quite all right. I will attempt not to tell war stories. As you can tell, I have a slightly southern accent. Nell and I from the same neck of the woods. I grew up in Macon and went to school in Atlanta. Went to the North Avenue Trade School. Everybody knows what that is? Georgia Tech. So we're friends of Penn State. We hate Ohio State, so we're all good. So I work for a company called the American History Project. We've been doing the type of stuff that we do for a long time. We're now a nonprofit, and what we do, I'll explain it to you. What we want to do is educate people about American history that they don't teach in schools. You'll never see, I had a nephew that graduated with honors at Baylor University. And I told him I was going to Iwo Jima, and he said, "What's that?" So they don't teach World War II, they don't teach Korea, they don't teach Vietnam, and they certainly don't teach Iraq and Afghanistan. They eliminate it from the schools. So our job is to present history. So we come to places like this and try to tell people about things. So if you have an organization that wants to learn about different combat stories, and you're going to get a couple after I'm through. I'm going to talk about Vietnam because that's my area, I suppose you would say. I've only been back 39 times, so I'm still a rookie. But this is our mission. We do everything from seminars to site trips. And when I say site trips, we go to places you only read about in history books. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, Guam, Saipan, Tinian, Philippines, Vietnam, Korea, where Sean and Rich are going to be taking 3 high schools back to Normandy to educate them on what we did in World War II in Europe. So we go everywhere, we do everything. I'm still a little stuffy from coming back from, we did Patton's run through Sicily with a group older than me, and I'm pretty young, as you can see. But we do these things. So if you have an interest in anything like that, or you think about wanting to go somewhere, we have a little setup in the back. And by the way, we're donating. There's a print in the back of the 28th Division. Anybody been in the National Guard here? All right, that's the 28th Division print from World War II that we've donated to the museum. And we intend to, if you want to buy a print, we can get those for you. Dave can make arrangements. So it's a nice, I mean, the Pennsylvania Guard has a great World War II history. If you don't know it, we'll come teach you about it. We do veterans groups. This is the 365th Fighter Squadron. They were P-47 people, pilots, crew, the works. We took them to every airfield they ever flew at. And in the last day, we got them flights in World War II airplanes, piloted by German pilots, by the way. But like I said, we do schools. And this is one of Sean's and Rich's trips. We do seminars, and if you want to know about Iwo Jima or the Chosin Reservoir or some off-the-wall place, I'll send Sean to you to tell y'all about it. And he's not, some of the war stories he tells are even true. So now, we're going to talk about Vietnam. Most people don't know squat about Vietnam. When I went to Vietnam, all I knew, it was there, the communists were in the north, the good guys were in the south, and we had to go fight. That's all I knew. And I was a young Studley helicopter pilot, believing I was bulletproof. I found out different, but that's the way we felt. So this is what Vietnam looks like. You can see it's not very big, about the size of Tennessee. Let me give you some facts. And I'm gonna move around here where I can read them. I don't need to explain them to you, but at the very bottom, you'll see the MIA-KIA. Got knocked down by one this last April. We've been working for about 15 years to try and recover the crew of a 086 Loach helicopter and 3 infantry guys. We've been going back to Tiger Mountain in the Ashaw Valley for a long time. This last April, we've been finding bits and pieces, helicopter parts, armored seats. But the first find was a minigun that came off the sides of the Loach. And if you don't know what a minigun is, it's a Gatling gun. And as we dug it out, we found the remains of one master sergeant. And he was buried in March the 2nd in Arlington. We returned him. So we're still trying. All right, I had a little personal stuff. That's me. I'm in the back seat. It's a Cobra, it's 3 feet wide, and that's what defended the infantry soldiers on the ground. That's my bragging part. We were known as the helicopter war. I don't need to read the stats to you. But you can see how many helicopter people were killed, both helicopter pilots and crew members. We lost a lot of airplanes. By the way, if you ever have a question, you can stop me at any time and I'll make up something if I don't know. But if you have a question, please stop me. Here's the history of Vietnam. This is only the Reader's Digest version because Vietnam is an old country. They've beat off the Chinese. They've beat off the Huns. They're survivalists. The French came in and took over the country. When they lost the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, that was the last straw. They had had another battle before that, which was called the Death of GM 100, which was an evacuation from along the Anke Pass to try and get rescued, but they didn't make it. So between Dien Bien Phu and the Death of GM 100, the French lost out. Divided the country. The country was divided until 75. We left in 73. Our first part of Vietnam was in 1945, and people don't know about that. We sent the OSS in. They armed the Viet Minh, or what they were called then, to help them fight against the Japanese who were there. They later used the same weapons against the French at Dien Bien Phu, which is kind of funny. But we made promises to them that we would help them with their independence if they would fight the Japanese. Roosevelt died. Truman had no idea what they were talking about. That was the time of everybody was worried about the communists, so we didn't support them. So Ho Chi Minh went to countries that would support him. He was a socialist. He was not a commie, but he used them for his own ends. Now, Vietnam's a small country. And because I have a missionary here, I'm going to talk about that. They have 107 million people. They are a godless country, just to be honest with you. Their ethnicities include the white Thai, the black Thai, the Hmong. They have all sorts of stuff. When Vietnam reunited, they were treated like slaves. No education, no anything. Now every house has a TV and a satellite dish, and every child is required to go to school, regardless of whether their parents are farmers or whatever. So they've gotten really strong into education. They start learning English from about the age of 3. So most of them will speak better English than I do. So this is a brief history just to give you an idea. The French divided the country into 3 sections for ruling purposes, basically. They brought in Catholicism. So there were Catholic missionaries everywhere. The country was largely Buddhist at that time. I use too many words in this thing, but you get the idea that World War II, our lack of support, Ho Chi Minh declared the country free, and so it was technically not. The French had a ruling family, a king, and once the war was over, they threw him out.
Could you talk about the Ashaw Valley?
Say again?
Could you talk about the Ashaw Valley?
Oh, I will talk about the Ashaw Valley.
Well, that's where I fought.
Yeah, the Ashaw Valley looks just like it did when you left it. It is still remote. It is agricultural totally now. All the valley parts have been converted to rice fields. There are some areas that raise cashews and almonds. which they largely export here. The rice, they're the second largest exporter of rice in the world. They sell their rice to China, Thailand, Philippines, here. But the Ashaw Valley is still dangerous in a lot of spots. There's a lot of unexploded ordnance there still. The area where we have been working around Tiger Mountain and just beyond where there's a Chinook crash, but it's still remote. There's no there are no cities in that area, but they do have a nice highway system now. We take people back to the Ashaw. People want to go to Hamburger Hill or Hill 881, 861. There are no roads to those places.
You know about Hamburger Hill?
Say again?
You know about Hamburger Hill?
Yes, I've been to Hamburger Hill. We found about a 12-foot long king cobra at Hamburger Hill, and I decided I didn't want to walk up it. So, but those you can go to those places by motor scooter, and if you want to climb the top, we'll let you do that. It's not easy for people our age to do that. I've had people say, "Well, I want to go to Hill 881." You get them out there, and they say, "Never mind," because it's still jungle and it's dangerous. And we found several snakes. I've got pictures of them, places where we found I don't know if it was a python about 20 feet long in the villages. We brought it back to the villagers and they ate him. But it's still remote. Totally, there's just nothing but farmland there. And it's the only area where the farmlands the rice is still picked physically rather than by a machine. So I have a collection of photographs if you want to see them later. By the way, the Vietnamese still dislike the Japanese because they were so cruel to them, but they take the Japanese money. This is what I talked about, the OSS coming in. They call it the Deer Team. They promised them the world if they would fight. By the way, Ho Chi Minh and General Giap never fired a weapon. They never wore weapons or used weapons. There was always somebody under them that did that. So Ho Chi Minh was inspired by our Declaration of Independence, by the way. And so he wanted to have his own country. And he'd been in several places. He was a chef. In fact, he was in Boston at one time around World War I. And he was in France for a while. Very smart guy because he knew he was a nationalist. He wanted to unite the country. Like I said, FDR promised them they would help them for independence, but the French wanted back because of the rubber plantations, and that's how the French economy was at that time. There's still rubber plantations there, but they're not owned by the French anymore. They're owned by different co-ops, different tire companies. Hankook Tires is in there. That's a Korea brand. So they still do rubber, but not for Michelin anymore. So we formally supported the French, and because of the communist influence. The French left after Dien Bien Phu. They were humiliated, and they signed the peace agreements in '54. But as you can see, they divided the country into the North and the South. It's the 17th parallel. It's not exactly even, but that's the way it is. This is a photograph of Dien Bien Phu from the Vietnamese side. You can see the French paratroopers falling in. They were not in the 82nd. they would have been more successful. But they had no way to resupply except from us. We kept resupplying them. That's the only military site that's still maintained by the French. If you ask by the Vietnamese. If you ask a Vietnamese person about their independence, they talk about gaining independence from the French in 1954, and not so much about us. They all want to be us and come to America, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They were supposed to have elections, but the South did not want to participate because they knew Ho Chi Minh would win. So the country was divided, and it stayed divided, and we started sending troops in. We started as early as 1950, supporting the French. Our first advisors went in, as you can see, JFK sent them in 1961. So we've been involved in Vietnam a long time. We tried to influence the government. The CIA helped take a couple of their rulers out in the South, so it's a thing. So the Tonkin Gulf incident happened in '64, and I've read all the stuff about it. It is what it is. Whether it was fake or not is beside the point. It's just that used, LBJ used that as an excuse to get involved, and he started pouring troops in. First Marines came in 1965 and landed at Da Nang, and Edgar was part of that, one of our former tour leaders who's since passed. First Cav came in right behind him. It's hard for me to turn around and look what I'm doing. So this was Rolling Thunder. That's what a B-52 strike looks like from altitude. This is what it looks like on the ground. And this is what it looks like in the aftermath. The whole country in the remote areas looked like that. Just nothing but holes in the ground. In 1965, the Marines had their first big battle, Operation Starlight. That was down in the Chu Lai area. Anybody been to Chu Lai? Well, I know we got Vietnam veterans back there, but that's where it was, down in that area. That's the first big battle that we had. Then, and followed up by the Battle of the Ia Drang Valley with the first Cav. And if anybody's seen, how many people have seen the movies We Were Soldiers Watching Young? Great movie. It's the only one that's true to form. Every other Vietnam movie is a bunch of baloney. Even Apocalypse Now, which featured my unit in Vietnam. You know, we love the smell of napalm. But it was about Hal Moore and Joe Galloway and people that I flew with. It was an awful, awful battle. No one has been back in the Ia Drang Valley except the Vietnamese. It's now almonds and cashews from a co-op that uses that water that drains that river that runs through. It's more like a creek than it is a river. But they don't allow people back in there because there's still some combat people from the north side still buried in that area. Now, Sean's going to talk about the Tet Offensive, and I'm not going to go into the Tet Offensive because I don't want to interfere with what he's talking about. But he'll tell you what happened during Tet. in 1968. But that's where Walter Cronkite helped turn the American public against the war. Everybody knows the story of My Lai and what happened there. Today it's a memorial. It's very peaceful, and they've done a good job at putting a memorial up. But it's a sad place to visit. We started drawing down in '69, and that was the Vietnamization portion. This is where I live. This is what a base camp in Phuoc Vinh looked like, in Vietnam looked like. This place called Phuoc Vinh. And we would get rocketed every night because you can see there's nothing but woods and jungle around us. But this was a large base camp, unlike a fire support base that all the infantry guys spent time on. All right, that's me going on a mission, so you can see I was really there. And I explained the box of C rations. We put those in the back of the Cobra. In case we got shot down, we'd have stuff to eat while we're sitting in a foxhole. The guy on the right's still alive too. His guy's name's Pat Stewart. And that bunker behind there is where I lived. I built that. So in '73, we got out. Congress quit funding the Vietnamese, and so things started going downhill. Everybody remember this? That's the evacuation from. This was two organizations were in there, NCIS and the CIA. That was their office building. It's right across from the post office. Building is still there, still looks the same. I'm waiting for them to tear it down, but they haven't so far. It just shows the desperation of people trying to get out. You got one Huey and hundreds of people. This is a tank as it rolled through the gates to the presidential palace. There were two tanks. One made it through, and one got stuck in the gate, but you never see that. Vietnam today. First thing you see when you get off the airplane is this. Now, Burger King is exactly the same, and you can see that's a family meal deal. Now, the nice thing about that is that's only about $10 for all that food. KFC, same as it is here. They still charge an arm and leg. KFC's become the downfall of the Vietnamese people because they like that fried chicken so much. This is morning traffic in Saigon. There's 6 million motorbikes there. That's the Rex Hotel. Everybody remember the Rex Hotel? Remember the 5 o'clock Follies? They still have a 5 o'clock happy hour called the 5 o'clock Follies in that hotel. It's been redone and it's an overpriced place to stay. This was taken from the Caravel, which is where all the generals used to stay. Everything's there. Coca-Cola is really huge. However, country's still third world. That's your morning market. And ducks. Ducks are the big thing. They love roast duck. They inject it with honey, and that's a duck and a loaf of bread feed a family of about 6. This is Vietnam at night. On the right, you see Hoi An, which is the ancient town that was settled by the Chinese a long, long time ago. And it's where you go buy all your souvenirs. the young girl in her, that's a traditional garb. They dress like that for the holidays. Every other day they're wearing the Daisy Duke shorts and 4-inch heels. They don't wear the custom stuff that they used to wear that was beautiful. They wear American stuff. They wear Levi's. This is one of my favorite shots. It's the pig market. They have a pig market every morning about 5 o'clock in the morning, and you purchase your pigs to go back and raise. Pork is a big thing in Vietnam. Now, they are artisans. You see this young lady over on the right. She's got a photograph, and what she's doing is she's embroidering that photograph in silk. Excuse me. It will be exactly like the photograph. They're extremely talented people. The girl on the other side is doing a linen tablecloth, excuse me. So they have great talent. If you're a cowboy boot wearer, you can take your Lucases over there and they'll make cobra skin cowboy boots look just like what you brought, or you can have alligator or anything else. They're very talented people. They have tailors, they do everything. Now, the other thing is every manufacturer that you know is in Vietnam. North Face, Canada Goose, Adidas, Apple, Samsung. They make Samsung refrigerators there, but don't put the doors on. They ship them back to Korea, put the doors on so they can say assembled in Korea. So Apple has a big manufacturing facility there. So every major company that has to do with clothing or electronics has some type of operation there. Remember I told you that every house would have a satellite dish and a TV? That's given to them by the government. So they go to school in the morning and they get other stuff in the afternoon, but the most popular programs in Vietnam are soap operas and things like The Price is Right and America's Got Talent. Half the country is still agricultural. The lady on the right is one of the ethnicities. She's one of the black ties. And you'll see this thing she's got on her head. If she's doesn't have any symbols, that means she's married. If she's got like a peso or whatever up front, that means she's looking for a husband. This is the village that they live in. Still third world. Now, when I tell you Vietnam was godless, 87% of the people have no religion. They have gotten away from Buddhism. Fastest growing religion is Catholicism. And they're growing by thousands and thousands every year. There are other, you're not allowed to preach on the streets there, but there are other ethnicities. There's an Amish community up by Hoi An, and they make things to sell, artisan stuff. There are a community of about 16,000 Muslims, but they are totally remote, do their own thing. They don't have anything to do with any other Muslim country. There's another religion called the Cao Dai, which is over in Tay Ninh. They used to have their own army. They have about 20,000 members, and they will accept Jewish, Catholics, Methodists, Southern Baptists. They don't care. You can become a Cao Dai. You have to give up certain things. No booze, no sex, and you have to work in their area. They have other offshoot craziness. They have the coconut religion where they worship coconuts because they're so healthy for you. But you can see that the countries, they're very secular. Now, You can see their trading partners. We're right on the top. Everything they do is pro-American. I'm stunned at it. Even when we run into their veterans that fought against us, they want to be your friend. They want to buy you drinks. They want to take you to dinner. I lost one tour group for 3 days who ended up at a reunion with the North Vietnamese, and they were not sober when they came back. They love Christmas. They don't have Thanksgiving, so Christmas starts in early November. This is in the lobby of a hotel I stay at called the Majestic. It's all Santa Claus. And every child wears either Santa Claus or Miss Santa Claus outfit during Christmas. It's amazing. These are pepper plants. Now, the reason I showed you pepper plants, how many people shop at Costco? If you buy peppercorns in Costco, that's where your pepper comes from. This is an area called Dong Ha. There's a lady who has a co-op who started Cinnabon, spent all her money to help the Vietnamese. She sold it all off. Her brother was killed in Vietnam. And so she went to Costco and said, hey, we have the best pepper in the world, buy it. And they did. So that's why I showed you the pepper plant. So that's an example of things we get. McCormick uses also. They have everything. Every beauty thing, every high-speed makeup. The Vietnamese have it all. Now, going back, most people say, I don't want to go back. I was one of those that didn't want to go back. I went and it changed my life. It's therapy. It gives you closure. You go back and remember those you lost or couldn't save. Guy on the left is a chaplain, by the way. This is McCain Monument. I put Lee Irby up there. How many people? Everybody knows who Lee Irby is, don't they? Full Metal Jacket, Mail Call. Yeah. They've replaced their monument because it had Don McCain's wrong branch of service, so they put a new one up for it. And that's it. Anybody got any questions for me? Yes, sir.
About the mountain yards, know anything about them? Are they still surviving?
The mountain yards, they're educated now. Their kids have to go to school. The government provides them with stipends to supplement they do mostly agricultural and animals. So the mountain yards are doing really great. And they have a craft guild of about, I don't know, maybe 50 different tribes. And they make all these things, forks, knives, and spoons out of buffalo horn. They make purses and wallets and little paintings and things. And they put them into museums in Hanoi and in Saigon and sell them, and they make money. The Montyards are still do not speak English well per se, but their kids do. The small children do. They are. I've never seen one that wasn't happy and smiling. When we go there, we bring things like M&Ms and just little things that the kids can enjoy, and they always get a kick out of it. They can buy M&Ms if they go downtown, but their parents, they don't really have a lot of money. There are no homeless in Vietnam, by the way. If you lose your place to live or your job, they train you for another job and find you a place to live, which is, I don't know how they do it, but you just don't. There's just no homeless on the street. Every guy there is an entrepreneur. They'll sell everything from fresh shrimp out of the water to pho, which is their soup. They sell greeting cards and postcards, and they have the best greeting cards in the world. They carve them. They're the kinds you open up and things pop up. So they have a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. So, but yeah, the Montagnards are actually doing better than the farmers in the far south down around Rackjaw and places like that. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
The government, I believe, gives official dates of Vietnam as 7 February 1964 to 8 May of 1975. But I noticed the dates you had were slightly different. Could you explain?
Yeah, that's what I said. I use the Reader's Digest version because we actually went in there in '61. People don't know about that, but our advisors, we had more people than people knew in '61 there. And
The first one was 7 February 64.
correct.
As opposed to August 64.
Well, that was when the Marines went in there. That's when the Marines went into Da Nang. That was their first big battle. We were in Saigon as early as 1950. But 61 is the date that JFK used to send a lot of people there. It's we interfered with the country a lot. Some good, some bad. But that country is pro-U.S. now. They hate China. And so we're thankful for that. The Korea and Japan has made a lot of investments there. So is Australia. And we have to, I think that eventually we'll have some type of trade agreement with them. Because if you ask a Vietnamese official, well, are you guys communists? He said, no, we just have a one-party system right now. They're as capitalistic as any country I've ever seen. They love making the dollar. And by the way, they have an official currency called the dong, but everybody uses American money over there. So it's the currency of choice. Yes, sir.
Some of the Montagnards I had a friend who served with them in Vietnam, Marine detachment. Those that supported Marines returned to Mountain, North Carolina. Some of them.
Correct. Yeah, there's a big Hmong community in North Carolina. And there's, I want to say Wisconsin. There's another one, small one. Where I live, we have a big Vietnamese community and we have a big Korean community. In Dallas, we have a big Vietnamese and Hmong community down there as well. And I've been to some of their reunions and I can't hang with them. Anybody else?
What does the Drain Valley look like?
The High Drain Valley is completely covered with vegetation. It's a cashew and almond farm. And there's no roads that lead into there. Everything's done by a motorbike, and they harvest manually. But that area is owned by a co-op. And the products help the local people. It's still pretty remote. There's no close villages by, but there are people who work in there. It's very peaceful. You'd never know there'd ever been a battle. You'd never know that we were there. The only time you see an evidence of a U.S. being in Vietnam, you'll see a truck going down the road. Its sides will be that perforated steel planking we used to use for runways on the sides. That's all you see. They have the Cu Chi tunnels, which is a tourist attraction. They keep the B-52 craters dug out because the rain evens it all out, and they keep the tunnels dug out so you can actually go down in them if you want to. But it's a strictly a tourist attraction. Anybody else? All right, stick a fork in there. I'm done.
I can't lose my voice.
Thanks, John, for your service to our country, and thank you for telling us about the history of the Vietnam, how we got to end up in the Vietnam during the war. We have a little bit of break. We're going to try to have lunch at noon, but before we do that, I got John Clay's going to come up and talk about sweats for vets. Come on up.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, my name is John Clay. I'm a Navy veteran, and just really happy to be here. Amazing educational experience. I wasn't expecting to be able to learn so much about our history and to see so many familiar faces. I work at the VA hospital, and so I get to see a lot of our heroes coming in and helping to treat our VA patients there. My area happens to be to help facilitate donors and volunteers. So it's a really great community that we have, and again, it's great to see so many people. One of the organizations that I try to help every year is Sweat for Vets. And if anyone isn't familiar, it's a group of local veterans who about 10 years ago started this charity to mostly help our homeless veterans. And so they deal with various organizations like the VA hospital, and when there's a need, and which happens just about weekly, it might be an electric bill or something like that that's overdue, they help directly. So I came in next weekend, next Saturday, we have an event over at the Jaffa starts around 4 o'clock. And so Dave was kind enough to let us come over and sell tickets. Tara over there in the red shirt, and we've got shirts for our event. And we'd love to see anybody there, particularly veterans. What we did, and one of the cool things we brought, Vitaroot made some specialty challenge coins. These were made for each service. So we're going to have a special presentation there for our veterans and hand out challenge coins that are special to your service. So we wanted to do something to remember what the point is of what we're trying to do with these organizations. And so I really appreciate your time. Happy to talk to anyone. I'll be here throughout the day today and tonight. We're excited to see Rocky Blyer, who is just a fantastic speaker. Wonderful speakers today, and I think we still have 2 folks left to come after lunch. So happy to chat with you. I'm really happy to see you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot, John. I got a few announcements, and then again, we're going to try to have lunch here within hopefully the next 15 to 20 minutes. Okay. First of all, the vendors. Please get back and visit the vendors. Look, they have the tables back here, and they want to show you, they have really nice displays and everything, and they have educational information. Second of all, Jolie Cover prepared one of the best, the greatest silent auctions that has ever been in Blair County. I'm telling you. And thanks to Sean Jerez and Travis Aldis, we have all kinds of great autograph stuff up there, and also a section on the Iwo Jima. I'm telling you, you got to get back and look at it. You got to go up here and get signed up and put bids into it. Okay, that's what this is all about. It's a fundraising event. Back here we got 50-50. Okay, 50-50. We got gun raffle. We got a big gun. Show them the gun. Now look at that. Look at that rifle. Henry Golden Boy, 22 long. Come on, man. Go get the $20 ticket. Get a chance. $100. We're going to do 100. Only 100. We're only selling 100. $20. Go get your ticket to win that rifle. Okay, that's all you're going to hear from me. I'll announce when lunch is coming. They're going to bring it out here, and we'll talk about. Okay, they'll go up and everything, and it's going to be a buffet style. So it'll be a great lunch. I'm telling you, it's going to be one hell of a lunch. You're going to say for $50, I got one hell of a lunch, and I'm going to get one hell of a dinner. Thanks. Okay, now we're going to start the afternoon program. We do have Rocky Blyer here. He's finishing his lunch. Then he's going to go out and sign books and everything. So if you buy a book for $30 each, and then the proceeds go towards the museum, all right? Now, don't forget, we still have 50-50. We're going to do 50-50 again tonight, right, Teresa? And then we still have this silent auction going on, as you can see, okay? Sign up for that. What about that rifle? Pick that rifle up over there. Look at that. Henry Goldboy, long rifle, 22 mag. Come on, go up there and get a ticket for $20. That's all they are. We also have t-shirts for sale back there. Okay, $25 a piece. All right, you Rich? You ready? I don't think so. Okay, our next speaker is a retired Marine, Rich Yoder, and he actually has a bachelor's degree from Rutgers University in 1977. Those Penn State fans, they might not like that.
I'm a big Penn State fan.
Oh, he's a big Penn State fan. He served 31 years in the Marine Corps before retiring. So let's give a warm out-to-the welcome for Rich Yoder.
Good afternoon. As already been stated, my name's Rich Yoder, and I have the privilege of being the first speaker after lunch, which is always the worst spot you can get, but I'll use the 5 B's of speaking, which is be brief, brother, be brief, and hopefully won't put you to sleep. A couple months ago, I got a call from Sean Jarosz, who is my partner in crime. We do a lot of tours together, and he said, we need to go to Altoona, Pennsylvania, and we need to talk about Vietnam. I thought, well, I'll talk about Way City. And he said, well, I'm talking about Way City. So I said, okay, what am I going to talk about? And then I saw the term Valor. And the first name that came to me was John Ripley. Are there any Marines in the room here? Yes? No? How many of you ever heard of John Ripley? Okay. Every Marine knows who John Ripley is. Okay. Let's see if we make this work. So today we're going to talk about a Marine's Marine, and a hero of the Marine Corps and a hero of our country. John Ripley was born on 29 June 1939 in Keystone, West Virginia. His mother, Verna Holt, was a Southern belle from Brookneal, Virginia. She was a devout Protestant, and she was very proud of her Southern heritage. His father was Francis Droit Ripley. He was a devout Catholic and from Decatur, Illinois. The Ripleys boasted that a member of their family had served in uniform in every one of our country's war since the Revolution. In the Civil War, they fought on both sides. On the way home from the hospital, there were complications, and John had to be rushed back. So from the start, this man was fighting for his life. John was a rambunctious youth. His father nicknamed him Baby Buck after a bucking bronco. Ripley's moved to Radford, Virginia, and this is where John grew up. It would be his home until he joined the Marine Corps. His house was right on the New River. It actually bordered his backyard. Within sight of the house, within a quarter of a mile, was a Civil War era trestle bridge. It crossed the New River, and there were tracks across it, but once you got to the other side, there were no tracks. So everybody in the town of Radford knew it as the bridge to nowhere. John spent his youth on that bridge. He would swing on the beams 40 feet above the New River, and he would dare people to follow him and do what he did. And as I prepared for this, it seemed to me that he was almost training for what was going to happen in 1972. John grew up a devout Catholic. You went into his house in the living room, there was a crucifix in the center of the wall. On the left of the wall was a picture of Robert E. Lee. On the right of the crucifix was a picture of Stonewall Jackson. So you can see the influence that both parents had on him as he was growing up. The rosary was said every day at noon. They never missed. John experienced an active outdoor life. He played guard on his high school football team. He had two brothers. One of them was in the band. And John once said, I can never understand why my brother would be in the band when you can legally hit somebody out here on the football field. So that's the kind of guy he was. One of his first jobs was selling newspapers at the train station. And that's where he first saw Marines. A lot of Marines go through Virginia. He felt that they had a better uniform and that they had more confidence than other services. So he decided he was going to be a Marine. John applied for to go to Annapolis, the Naval Academy. But his grades were average and he was named 4th alternate. So he enlisted in the Marine Corps. And a year later, he was accepted to the Naval Academy. But again, because of his grades, he had to spend a year at the Naval Academy Preparatory School. He made it through and he reported to the Naval Academy. And this is where his life was transformed. And he became a student. He learned how to study. He learned how to learn, basically. He would graduate from the Naval Academy in 1962 with a degree in electrical engineering. And he accepted a commission as a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. This picture is with him with his brother Michael. Another interesting story, he was a Harrier test pilot. And his plane, one of the planes he was testing crashed at Patuxent River and he was killed. And he was so highly thought of that to this day, the Outstanding Test Pilot Award is named after him. After graduation from the Naval Academy, new officers received 30 days leave. John Ripley turned that leave down, reported immediately to Quantico, so he actually got a head start on those that were in his class. He was the only Marine member of his class to do that. May 1964, John attended the Army Airborne School. While he was there, he was observed by a Marine captain who invited him to join Force Recon Company in the Marine Corps. He accepted. Next, he graduated from the Navy Scuba School. And in May 1965, John graduated from the Army Ranger Course as one of 3 honor graduates. He was known as a triple threat for having completed those 3 schools. After receiving his Ranger tab, John deployed to the Dominican Republic in 1965, and that's where he got his first taste of combat. We'll back up a year. While he was still at the Naval Academy, he was home and he met a woman named Moline Blaylock. She was a Protestant like his mother. Very tough, very nice lady. In the town of Radford in those days, your social prestige was determined by how high up you lived from the river. So I've already told you, John's backyard bordered the river, touched the river. Moline lived at the top of the hill. Okay, so socially they were pretty far apart. However, it worked. Now, John's father was a forceful guy. Moline once told a story. She said the phone rang one night on a Friday night, and it was John's father. And he said, me and my wife are going to Annapolis tomorrow to see John. We want you to go. Be ready in 5 minutes. Click. She went. Okay. So these two would end up getting married, had a wonderful relationship, and John would be a loving husband and father of 4 children. And he was devoted to his wife for the rest of their life. She actually would die before he did. May 1965, Lieutenant Ripley was assigned to 2nd Force Recon Company. Upon completion of training, he was transferred to Vietnam. In October 1966, he joined 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, was assigned as commanding officer of Lima Company. Because of his aggressive nature, he was known for his aggressive nature. He was always on the attack. And in fact, his motto was attack, attack, attack. which he got from Stonewall Jackson. Every evening while out in the field, John would make his men move their fighting positions after dark. Marines complained about it. They hated it. Until one night after they moved, their original positions were bracketed by enemy artillery and destroyed. After that, they never complained about it again. John also insisted that his Marines shave every day. You live in absolute squalor and misery, but he said you're still a Marine and you're going to look like a Marine. Even if your clothes are ragged, you're going to be clean shaven. So he was known for that. Lima Company became known as Ripley's Raiders. During his tour, he was awarded the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Valor device, and the Purple Heart. And a lot of the accounts I've read from his Marines say they give him full credit for keeping them alive during their year in Vietnam. Returning to the United States, John Ripley attended the Amphibious Warfare School, was assigned to a tour at Headquarters Marine Corps as an infantry captain's monitor. Pretty important job in the Marine Corps. 1969, he reported to the British Royal Commandos. He served with the Royal Commandos in Norway and then was assigned to the 3rd Royal Commandos in Singapore. He also became the first Yankee or American to command a British commando unit when he was put in charge of Y Company 45th Commandos. He served 2 winters with the commandos above the Arctic Circle. Completing commando training, John Ripley was designated as a quad body. That meant he had completed the 4 toughest courses in the world for a military person. Captain Ripley returned to Vietnam as an advisor in 1972. In that time, the number of U.S. forces in the country had dropped from 500,000 to 27,000. The South Vietnamese military were taking charge of defending their own country. Captain Ripley was assigned as an advisor to the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marine Division. Okay, this is a Vietnamese division, so he was the only American there. In March 1972, the division was operating above the city of Dong Ha. Dong Ha was the last South Vietnamese stronghold south of the DMZ on Route 1, the main MSR. The left of the Vietnamese line towards Laos or Cambodia was defended by Camp Carroll. This had been an American position which had been turned over to the Vietnamese. On March 30th, 1972, the North Vietnamese, commanded by General Giap, attacked the northern positions with 14 divisions and several hundred tanks. This was also known as the 1972 Spring Offensive. They rapidly pushed through all the South Vietnamese outposts. 3rd Battalion was ordered to fall back to Dong Ha and to protect it. They were to buy time. The battalion reached Dong Ha at the same time that the North Vietnamese army arrived. And it was a race between the 3rd Battalion and the North Vietnamese armor to get to the bridge. Okay, this was the only bridge in Vietnam that armor could cross, up north. The leadership had directed that the bridge not be destroyed. Okay, this was from the south. Do not destroy the bridge, because they wanted, if there's a counterattack, they want to use that bridge to get back up north. This is the bridge at Dong Ha. Was built in 1969. This is a 1969 photograph. Was built by Navy Seabees. Ripley said afterwards that there was so much steel used to build that bridge that they could have built a battleship with it. It was really well built. Understanding the dire nature of the situation and the speed of the Norse advance, the senior advisor, Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Turley, U.S. Marine Corps, ordered Captain Ripley to destroy the bridge. Now, this was against the wishes of the country. Captain Ripley, and he was not alone, there was a Major James E. Smock, United States Army, who was the advisor to the South Vietnamese tank battalion that was assigned to support 3-3, approached the bridge. Captain Ripley crossed the barbed wire, which was at the base of the bridge, and Major Smock handed cases of explosives through the wire. And then under constant enemy fire from the far side of the bridge, Captain Ripley swung across the bottom on his hand, using his hands, his feet dangling, bullets whizzing by him from North Vietnamese shooting from the other side. He crossed the trestle bridge just as he had as a child in Radford, except now they were shooting at him. 5 times Captain Ripley made the trip across that bridge, carrying 80 to 90 pounds of explosives each time. He packed that bridge so that it would explode. He then came back across the bridge and he dropped totally exhausted to the ground. And about this time, Major Smock came up and said, I found the blasting caps, because they had no blasting caps. So Ripley had basically used his teeth to set up all these defensive positions. Well, Ripley lay there for a minute. His arms are numb, his legs are numb. And he said, I got to go back one more time, because now we got blasting caps. So one more time, he crawled through the concertina wire and went out across that bridge. And he put in a second set of explosives using the blasting caps. And he did that so that if the first set failed, there would be a second option. Setting the fuses, he came back across, and him and Major Smock went into the defensive positions. And they waited. Very tense moment. Can they get this bridge blown up before the North Vietnamese get across it? While they were waiting, John Ripley saw a young Vietnamese girl out on the road crying. She had lost her mother. She was about 2 or 3. So he ran out on the road and he picked her up and he sprinted back towards the position. And he was almost there when the bridge went up. And the pressure from that blast blew him into a ditch with the girl. They both survived. This is a painting by Colonel Charles Waterhouse. He's probably the premier artist for the Marine Corps. Done a lot of World War II paintings. He painted a lot of Iwo Jima pictures, actually using sand from Iwo Jima in the picture. This is what the bridge looks like now. Captain Ripley got back, found his radio operator, and reported to Lieutenant Colonel Turley, sir, the bridge is down. Lieutenant Colonel Turley was amazed that the bridge had been destroyed, and he was also amazed that Captain Ripley was still alive. He never expected either of those to happen. This is a picture of John Ripley. He's on the left, and that's Lieutenant Colonel Turley on the right. It was taken about 2 days before the Easter offensive began. The actions of Captain Ripley and Major Smock, and Ripley never said, I did this. Okay, he always said, the Major and I. And he also included there was a South Vietnamese private who had gone up to the bridge and taken 2 anti-tank weapons up there and had actually stopped the first tank from coming across the bridge. And he always said that. He always gave credit to the others about what happened there. But by destroying this bridge, they gained the South 3 weeks in which they were able to put together a defense. And eventually they would stop the Easter offensive and push it back. It would take them till September. Another key event from this battle was that General Giap, the hero of Dien Bien Phu, who had led the North Vietnamese forces for 20 years, was removed from command by the North Vietnamese because he could not get through. The 3-3 did not retreat right away. They defended the citadel, which was at Dong Ha, until they were ordered to relieve. When they mustered, after being relieved, out of 300 Marines, there were 50 that were left. They fought very valiantly. Captain Ripley would be awarded the Navy Cross for his actions on this bridge. Major Smock would be rewarded with the Silver Star. After the war, John Ripley was promoted to Major, Lieutenant Colonel, and Colonel. He commanded the 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. He commanded the 2nd Marine Regiment. He would serve as the G3 of 3 MEF, that's Marine Expeditionary Force, in Okinawa, Japan. Served as the Director of History and Museum Division. After retiring from the Marine Corps, he would serve as President of Southern Seminary College for Women. He would also serve as president of Hargrave Military Academy. He taught history and English at the U.S. Naval Academy. He was inducted into the Army Ranger Hall of Fame. And he was very outspoken against women in combat roles and also against gays in the military. Probably why he retired as a colonel. 2002, he found out that he needed a new liver. He had hepatitis. It went all the way back from blood transfusions in Vietnam. A liver was found, and the operation was done, but it was not successful. He needed another one. They found another liver, a second liver. It was up in Philadelphia. He was down in Washington at Bethesda Hospital. But they didn't think he could live long enough for the liver to be transported back to Washington. So the Commandant of the Marine Corps called the President, and he told him what was going on. And the President of the United States sent his personal helicopter to get that liver. They got it back. Second transplant was successful. But John had a long road to recovery. So the Commandant of the Marine Corps called in the Color Sergeant of the Marine Corps. And he ordered that the battle colors of the Marine Corps be put in John Ripley's room and that they not be removed until he left the hospital. So eventually John did leave the hospital. 2006, he revisited Dong Ha. He would spend the rest of his life counseling midshipmen at the U.S. Naval Academy. He lived right outside the academy. On 28 October 2008, John Ripley passed away in his sleep. He was buried at the Naval Academy on 7 November. 2,500 people attended his funeral. The Commandant was one of them. He was an honorary pallbearer. In 2026, this year, Congress recommended upgrade of the Navy Cross to the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor will be presented to his family sometime here in the near future. John Ripley was a great Marine. The book, A Bridget Dong Ha, is required reading at the Naval Academy. But he's just one story from the Vietnam War. There are thousands of heroes. In my opinion, all of you vets that served in Vietnam are heroes. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rich, for the service, your service to our great country, which is great, and also thank you for your presentation. I actually am one of the lucky ones in the room. I got to meet John Ripley, so I'm actually feel really fortunate to be able to say that. So, again, this will be the last time, at least today, I'll say about the fundraising, because what we're going to do, we have one more speaker, and then we got to get out. Everybody's have to get out of this room because they have to rechange over the tables for tonight. So. Again, we have the silent auction, and we have the 50-50. We have the gun. The gun's back there. We need $20 for a ticket to get a gun. Okay, and so let's talk about our last speaker. Now, Sean and I go back a long time. Okay, and you'll see from his presentation he was a school teacher, 28 years, and he also served the Marine Corps honorably. But one thing people don't realize. He actually got awarded the Good Conduct Medal when he's a Marine. I can't believe it, knowing him as many years as I've known him, which is a long time, that he actually got awarded the Good Conduct Medal. I can't believe it. But anyways, let's give a warm altitude welcome for Sean Jerez.
I would have worn my Good Conduct Medal tonight, but I'm afraid of being accused of stolen valor. So I don't do that. There it goes. Okay, like Dave said, my name's Sean Jerez. I'm a retired history teacher for 28 years. Taught at George Mason University as well. And for about the last 23 years, I've been taking veterans back to the battlefields of World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and it's been just an incredible ride so far. So like John had told you earlier, we decided we were going to start our own company, and we really want to be able to teach American history through the eyes of veterans. And before I get started, Rich was talking about Colonel John Ripley. I was the executive director for the Iwo Jima Association of America for 14 years. So when I first was hired to that position, I was hired by a guy by the name of Major General Fred Haynes, who was the operations officer for Combat Team 28. Those are the guys that raised the flag on Mount Suribachi. So although all of those guys were gone, the guy who told them, get up there and raise that, I was able to meet this guy. One of my greatest accomplishments in life is he had the poor sense to hire me, but it has been really incredible. And it really starts with this guy that's right behind me. His name's Major Rick Spooner. And Major Rick Spooner owned a restaurant in Quantico. I know we've got one Marine in here somewhere. You ever been to the Globe and Laurel, sir?
I've been to his restaurant. I never passed away, but there was I have a beautiful picture of 6 cross holders with Major Spooner.
Okay. So Major Rick Spooner owned this restaurant. It was a crossroads of the Marine Corps. And John Ripley was the historian for the Iwo Jima Association for quite a while. When he retired and eventually he passed away, I was his replacement as historian. So this place, the Globe and Laurel, which unfortunately is no longer there anymore, it was a place where Marines could go and actually learn about Marine Corps history. It was a really incredible place. And when I was just a young buck of like 30 years old and I actually started going there, we used to go in the back and smoke cigars and everything. And Major Spooner has 3 books that he's written. They're out of print, but you can still buy them on eBay. Incredible books. He was a veteran of the Battle of Tarawa. He participated in the landing on Saipan during World War II. He was a prisoner of war for 9 days before he escaped. He then participated in the invasion on Tinian, on Okinawa, and then he was with the occupation forces in Japan. By the way, he is still alive. He is like 99 years old. He's very, very frail. But what an incredible man. And he knew and he respected the Marine Corps so much. He had grown up in the Marine Corps, Battlefield Commission, and he created a safe space where Marines could come in and actually talk. And we used to have the royalty of the Marine Corps walk in there all the time. And the talk that I'm giving today is on the Battle of Hue. And you could walk in on any given Saturday into this Globe and Laurel restaurant, and you would have the royalty of the Marine Corps sitting in there. And they were so accessible. You could go in after their dinner and talk to them. You could have a drink with them, smoke a cigar, do all this other stuff. It was incredible. It was just so neat. Rocky Blyer is here today. A lot of people don't know, but the commanding officer that was in charge of the Battle of Hue was a guy by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Ernie Cheatham. He's going to retire a lieutenant general. However, he played 4 games with the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 1954. He was drafted by the Steelers in the early 1950s, was then drafted after the Korean War. He played those 4 games. And then, so I believe he was from Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure. The other guy that was there was Colonel Chuck Meadows. He actually worked for the previous company that we worked for, which was Military Historical Tours. Chuck Meadows took out all of our Vietnam tours, and he was quite a draw because he would have people walking through the streets of Hue, and we still do that. When we take our participants to Vietnam, you get a personalized tour that goes right across the river. We go into the Citadel so you can see exactly the route that they had. The next one is Brigadier General Mike Downs, who was a captain during this time period. He was married to Martha Puller. Brigadier General Downs is still doing very well. His wife is Martha Puller. For those of you who do not know who the Puller name is, Chesty Puller's most decorated Marine in Marine Corps history. Nominated 5 separate times for the Medal of Honor. Never received a single one. They downgraded him all to the Navy Cross because he had a big mouth. So this was a guy who would tell you exactly what he thought. No, it didn't matter what the repercussions were. He was going to tell you what he thought, and most of the time what he told you really pissed off the brass. So the next one was Captain Ron Christmas, who eventually is going to become a lieutenant general in the Marine Corps. He is married to Cheryl Jean Lowndes, who her father is David Lowndes, who at the time in 1968 at Khe Sanh was in for the fight of his life. He was the regimental commander up at Khe Sanh Combat Base. And as you learn, this is part of the instrumental part of Tet, because that was the whole pivot and the whole idea behind Tet was to destroy that base. So that was also, he was the regimental commander for Bill Dabney, who was also married to Virginia Puller, who was the daughter of Chesty Puller. So it was amazing how small the Marine Corps was back then, because it was almost like everybody knew each other. And it was this small, dysfunctional, cultish family. But man, you could just walk into the Globe and Laurel and you were always welcomed. If you were a Marine, if you were law enforcement, if you were a fire person, if you were a first responder, you weren't buying a whole lot of drinks. It was a really, really cool place. So the last claim to fame that General Christmas has is he is the one who raised the funds and then eventually is going to build the Marine Corps Museum, which it's only 3.5 hours from here. If you have not been to the Marine Corps Museum, I highly recommend it. It is, in my judgment, one of the best museums in the entire world. It is such a great educational place. They've got the museum that Dave is raising is going to be designed to educate America's youth. And that's exactly what they're doing at the Marine Corps Museum. So with the Battle of Hue, we're going to start in 1967 for the pre-Tet. And what's really important to know is in 1967, the Vietnamese are losing this war. They cannot recruit enough VC or NVA in order to keep the recruitment going. So as a result of that, they understand that they've got to make some changes. Now, they always say that war is controlled by old men trying to relive their youth. If you think about Dien Bien Phu, and that's been said many times today, Dien Bien Phu was planned out by General Giap and Ho Chi Minh. And the whole idea here is they were going to have this general uprising, and they wanted to kick the French out of Vietnam. So what they're going to do is they're going to get everybody involved in this fight. They're going to rise up against the French. They're going to defeat them at a place that the French thought was like there was just no way they could ever lose there. And so as a result of this general uprising, they're going to defeat the French and kick them out of there. And that's exactly what they want to recreate in 1968 at Tet. So it's going to have 3 phases. The first phase is in 1967 at Con Thien, which is where John Ripley was fighting as well. They're going to test the mettle of the U.S. military and the ARVN forces. They've got to be able to pull all of the military and all of these military officers out of the city centers, because what they want to do is infiltrate with their communist leaders and start recruiting more people. So this is all a well laid out plan. Phase 2 and 3. Second phase of the adult of the major cities and political centers of the South. They're going to convince the American people that the war cannot be won. So they're going to start immediately. Their defense minister is going to have a press conference and make the announcement, we are ready for peace negotiations. So if you think back, I look around here and a couple of you are from 1967. If you think back on there, our media played right into the hands of the North Vietnamese because they were eating this stuff up. We had people going to North Vietnam saying, well, these are peaceful people. They just want peace. And so that's exactly what they're going to get. All right. So phase 3 is there's going to be an all-out assault at Khe Sanh Combat Base. They want to make that the Dien Bien Phu of 1968. So they learn a couple things. The first thing is the chief military architect is once again going to be General Giap. And he's going to plan this whole thing out. They're going to come up with this plan called the General Offensive General Uprising. And the whole idea is they're going to start all of these attacks at Con Thien, at Khe Sanh, and Hue, and they're going to get all of the public all through South Vietnam and North Vietnam. They're going to get them to unite, and then they're going to overthrow this puppet government. That is what they believe is going to happen on paper. It's not going to work out so smoothly for them. So let's talk a little bit about the ancient city of Hue. Citadel was built in 1802. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson is the President of the United States. So this is an old palace, okay? 1802, because it is so old, there's going to be a lot of fire restrictions and rules of engagement inside of the ancient city of Hue that are really going to be a problem for the American fighting man. It's defended by a moat and roughly 20-foot masonry walls. The palace walls are 6 to 16 feet tall. Prior to the Tet Offensive, Hue was pretty much left alone. This was the cultural hub and the peaceful hub of Vietnam. So this was a garden city. Nobody fought there because it was off limits. If you want to think about Tet, like if you look at one of the tours we're advertising, it's in February next year. It'll be after Tet because everything shuts down. It's all of our patriotic and religious holidays all wrapped into one. So this is a huge deal to the Vietnamese people. So in 1968, because of what happens in 1967 at Tet, at Con Thien, what they decide is we've got to build up I Corps. The North was just streaming down and almost overtaking there at Con Thien. Thank God we had the weapons that we had. So as a result of that, what they're going to do is they're going to decide they've got to build up an I Corps. And if you look at this map, everything from Phu Bai, I don't know if this is going to work or not. Oh, here we go. Everything from Phu Bai up to, let me see where my, there it is. Everything from Camp Evans down to Phu Bai is going to be, that's going to be the busiest road in in Vietnam. So 3 out of 4 divisions are going to be based out of Phu Bai. This is going to be incredibly, incredibly busy. Let me see. I went too far. So, Hue City, if you look at the map up here, the way it works out, this right here is the 1st ARVN Division. They've got their airstrip right here, and then the MACV, which is the Military Assistance Command for Vietnam. That's an acronym is MACV, is going to be across the street, across the Perfume River, and the NVA will never take that building. They never take that, the ARVN Division headquarters either. So this is really going to help us out in this fight. If you're driving from Phu Bai and you're going to the city of Hue, it's about a 30-minute drive, even today. So the speed limit is about 30 miles per hour there. You can't go much faster than that because everybody is driving mopeds and everything. So in 1968, nobody believed for a second that the communists were going to invade South Vietnam and start Tet. What they didn't know is that there were already 2 NVA regiments that were already inside and around the city, the ancient citadel in Hue. So the military is so busy building up with all of this stuff coming into Phu Bai, what they do is they really start dropping some balls with their military intelligence. As a result of that, the NVA are really going to start moving men into this area in January 1968 and early 68. So William Westmoreland is getting some whispers that there's something going on during the truce that they had during Tet. It's supposed to be a 3-day truce. So William Westmoreland goes to General Wheeler, who's the chairman of the Joint Chief. He says, you know what? I think we got to cancel this because there's something not quite right here. So General Wheeler tells him, you know what? Cancel it. If you don't think it should be there, then don't do it. So General Westmoreland issues an order. We're going to cancel Tet, and nothing happens. There's a communications error, and as a result of that, the ARVN, the MACV compound, nobody in South Vietnam is going to get the word that this thing is canceled. The South Vietnamese government does not even know it's going to happen. So over in the ARVN division, you have General Trong. On his own initiative, he's going to decide that, you know, there's something really going screwy here. And he doesn't really have the authority to cancel the truce, but he holds back as many men as he can. He cancels their leave. There's still a lot of men that have already gone out on leave, though. So what he does is he puts all of his men that are there in Hue on high alert, and he tells them, you're not going anywhere, and you guys got to really watch what's going on here. He then has all of his officers trying to get in touch with all the men that already went home on leave, and he tells them, if anything at all happens, you need to get back here immediately because we've got to have you here. Now, starting in early January, what they're going to start doing is they're going to move all of this ammunition in. They're going to do ordnances, demolition stuff. All of these weapons of war, they're going to move them into the ancient city of Hue. They're disguising it as presents and civilian goods for the celebration. Out in the hinterlands, out in the jungles and in the rice paddy villages and stuff like that, what the combat action patrols are starting to see is the villagers are coming up and asking them for sandbags. So inside of their huts, what they're doing is they're digging down and sandbagging all that stuff, and they're literally creating forts inside of their huts. So they know something is happening. It's being reported back, but everybody's not talking to each other because of that buildup. So the first shots of Tet are going to happen at 2200 at an ARVN bridge, pontoon bridge by An Hoa. And once the NVA pass this ARVN unit, they're just gonna scramble into the Citadel. And like I said, this is an ancient city. So they're gonna come in on this route. However, the only parts that they actually take here is the Taylock Airfield, the Taylock Airfield, and then the 1st Division Ordnance Battalion's ordnance. They really don't take anything else. However, they're basically gonna cut the entire ancient city diagonally in half. So the ARVN are going to hold, and the NVA are going to try to kick them out of there. The NVA during this time period, they were so confident in this uprising and general offensive that what they honestly believed is that as soon as they got into the ancient city of Hue and they raised their flag, immediately the general population would have this uprising, and so they were packing their dress uniform, khaki uniforms, in their backpacks, and they were going to get changed, and they were planning on having a parade to the ancient city of the Citadel. Didn't quite work out that way. So the 1st ARVN Division puts up a great fight at the northwest wall. Like I said, they did not, the communists did not take over any major parts of the ancient Citadel. Across the river, right over here is the MACV compound. That is never going to fall. So most of the government buildings across the Perfume River as well, those are going to drop. They're going to be occupied by the NVA and VC. So this is going to be the big fight. So as of January 31 at 0800, the NVA are going to raise a 54 square meter blue and red flag for the National Liberation Front. Over on Phu Bai, January 31st, they wake up and they hear, well, something's wrong over in Hue. However, they have no clue what in the world's going on. The weather is so bad, it's drizzly, it's cold, it's rainy. It is going to sock in the area for 3 weeks. So during the Battle of Hue, there's not going to be any air support at all. So these guys are really, really in trouble, but they don't even know it yet. So 1st Battalion, 1st Marines under Mark Gravel, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Gravel, are going to head toward Way, and their job is to secure the Navy LCU ramp, Camp Evans, and then the MACV compound. So as they leave Fubai Airstrip, they're heading toward the ancient city of Way. They pass over the Ankou Bridge, and that's when the wheels come off the wagon. They are attacked in force by the NVA, and they start fighting their way toward the MACV compound. They get as far as a turning circle that is past a cane field, and that's when they stall at their assault in getting into the MACV compound. Leaving 30 minutes later, you're going to have Golf Company 2-5, which is the Palace Guard under Captain Chuck Meadows. Their job is going to be to go into the Citadel and rescue, which they're not even calling it a rescue mission. They just have to get General Trung out of there because they can't have this Lieutenant General falling to the NVA. So they all think that this is going to be just a general mission. They're just going to go in, they're going to escort them out. They were all thinking it was going to be an R&R thing. As a matter of fact, Chuck Meadows told all of his men, drop your gear, we're going to post a fire watch, and they left half of their equipment behind. They load up into 6x and they start heading toward the MACV compound. Once they get past the Ankou Bridge, all hell breaks loose. They're able to fight their way all the way up to that same turning circle where Mark Gravel and 1-1 are fighting for their lives. They get in there, and this is where, I don't know if you guys know anything about the Battle of Way. There's a very famous map. Chuck Meadows is looking for cover and concealment. He goes busting into an old Texaco station, and there happens to be a map up on the wall of the ancient city and the new city of Way. There are no maps of this thing. So the military maps that they had were just in horrible shape. So he rips this map off, and he's able to regroup, and they fight their way with 1-1 all the way into the MACV compound. So once they get to the MACV compound, Chuck Meadows, they expand their controlled area. They're going to go up to the Nguyen Hong Bridge right over here. They're going to take over that park and the LCU ramp, which is down a little bit further. So they're going to secure this entire area right here. Now, the problem with this is the weapon that we had during that time period was the M16. It is not a very powerful weapon. So in spite of what you hear on the news and everything else about it being a true weapon of war, I would rather be shot with an M16 than an M1. This weapon will not knock you on your butt. It'll knock you down, but it's not going to knock you off your feet. And the problem is its maximum effective range is 480 meters. I remember that from boot camp back in 1981. Thank you. So the problem is the NVA are firing AK-47s. That AK-47, it's all harassing fire across the Perfume River at the Marines. So these guys, it's just harassing fire, but it's still hitting Marines. So as a result of that, already the weapons that we have there are going to really play a role in what happens in Way. Captain Meadows, as soon as they secure that area, he decides he's got to go over and he's got to go get General Trung. So he starts making his way across this bridge, the Nguyen Hong Bridge. It's kind of arched like this. And as he gets over the rise, all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. The NVA are across the bridge, right over in this area, and they actually have an old World War II bunker that the Japanese put there. They packed it up with sandbags, and they had a serious fortified fighting position. Chuck Meadows and his unit are able to fight their way across the bridge. Once they get to this bridge, they then take a hard left, and they're going to try to get through the Trong Tu Bridge. Now, this is a long road, and there's like a movie theater and stuff like that, but there's lots of flat areas that there's not a lot of cover and concealment. So you can see these Marines here. This is from '68. These Marines are hiding behind trees and stuff, and man, they are taking massive, massive casualties. This was the furthest they advanced right here. If you look over on the left-hand side of the picture, right here. You can see there's still the pharmacy is there. They, bunch of the machine gun squads got up on top of the roof and they started laying a base of fire down, firing into the Trong Tu Bridge. That is a fortress. On the other side of the road, you actually have Chuck Meadows hiding behind a tree trying to assess what is going there. And at this point, in a 3-hour fight, 5 Marines are killed, 44 wounded, and losses are at 35%. Chuck Meadows says, we're out of gas, we can't do it anymore. So at 1900, he's going to withdraw his troops. They now have to fight their way back across the river and get out of there. So they do not take the Trong Tu Bridge. Inside of the Citadel on January 31st, the ARVN unit is going to be reinforced with ground and air battle group, 2 airborne battalions, 1 company of armored cavalry, and they are going to be supported by ARVN 155, the howitzers. They're the only ones who are going to be allowed to fire these heavy artillery pieces into the ancient city of Wei. The U.S. Marines are going to be fighting this entire battle with M16s and M60s. That's it. They are not allowed to use any other weapons at this point. So, on February 1st, 1-1 and Golf 2-5 are ordered to assault the 310 Provincial Prison, 8 blocks away. Now this is, every single building is completely controlled by the NVA at this point. So there's still not a clear picture as to what is going on in Wei, and they keep on telling them, hey, there's a lot more people here than you think there are. However, they're giving them orders they've got to follow. So the very first thing that Chuck Meadows realizes is his men are sorely underprepared for this because they have been doing nothing but jungle fighting since they got there. As a matter of fact, in boot camp, none of them were taught anything about urban warfare. So what they learned just through trial and error is that when you're fighting in an urban environment, it's a 3-dimensional battlefield. You have to get online, and you are as fast as your slowest unit that is securing buildings. You have to secure the first floor of every building. You then have to go up and secure all the way to the roof, and then come back down, get online, and then you got to sweep and keep moving forward. So this is really, really going to create a lot of heavy casualties for this. As a result of that, they start calling for reinforcement. This is when Captain Mike Downs comes in, and they specifically tell him, you're going to be in charge of getting the provincial prison while they're clearing other buildings. February 2nd, they're going to go to Captain Ron Christmas at Hotel 25, and he is heading from MACV, and his orders are to go to the MACV compound and then reinforce and then help them out there. Once again, as soon as they get to the Ankou Bridge and the cane fields, the wheels come off the wagon, they start getting attacked in force. Captain Ron Christmas is eventually going to fight his way all the way to the MACV compound, and they're gonna put him to work immediately. On February 3rd, if you look at this picture here, this is the University of Wei. It is now a luxury resort. But you think about this, it's a huge courtyard inside of a 4-story structure that surrounds you no matter where you go. So they had to fight their way into the courtyard first of all, and then starting on the first floor, fight their way all the way up all 4 floors and then secure the roof. The amount of casualties was astronomical. And already, most of these guys did not have the equipment that they needed because they left it back on Firewatch because there wasn't enough information for them to take it all. So the 310 Provincial Prison is going to fall before Captain Downs can even get to it. And all of those prisoners, which are communist sympathizers, are then going to take to the streets and start harassing the civilians. And they're going to start fighting with the VC. So now we got more problems there. As a result of that, they're going to call in Lieutenant Colonel Ernie Cheatham. He's helped pick to lead these guys, and he realizes immediately these guys are not trained for urban warfare. So he goes into the 5th Regiment's CP, and he finds 2 books on urban warfare, and he starts becoming an expert immediately. He reads these 2 books, and he realizes we got to have gas, we got to have grenades, and we've got to be able to secure these areas. So he gets as many gas grenades, he gets as many regular grenades, and reinforcements. He's got to have lots of reinforcements. The problem is there's not a lot of reinforcements here. They've all moved up toward Camp Evans, or they're en route to Fubai. So what he starts doing, every Marine is a rifleman. So he goes in, he starts grabbing drivers, he's grabbing mechanics, cooks, bakers, key typists, clerk typists, and he tells them, grab your weapons, we're going to war. So he loads them all up in a truck, and they start heading down to the MACV compound. The reinforcements are really what's going to make a difference here, because these guys are really, really smart. They're really going to be what breaks the edge here. So there's 3 basic rules for conducting combat in a built-up area. The first one is to isolate the battlefield. You're going to seize the footholds and then conduct systematic clearing operations. Now, I have a question for you guys. Did the NVA do any of this? Think about how many times we had Marine units going over the Ankou Bridge that I've told you about 4 times. Did they stop them at all? No. So the NVA have not taken advantage of any of these principles. So immediately, Ernie Cheatham is going to say, well, that's exactly what we're going to do. So they're going to start expanding their footprint in the ancient city of Wei. So on February 3rd, the fire support restrictions are finally lifted in the new city of Wei. So now they can use mortar, they can use 106 millimeter recoilless rifles and everything else. So the first thing they're going to do is take the Treasury building. It's basically a vault. And what they believe is that because they own Wei City University, they've got a really good fire support from the top of that university, and they can fire down onto the Treasury building. The problem is it's a vault. You guys know what a Laws rocket is? It's a personal, one-time use rocket. It was supposed to replace the bazooka. You actually pop it out. It's a disposable weapon. You pop it out, you fire it like a little champagne cork, shoots out the back, and this little rocket fires out the front. Well, the problem is it's not punching through the wall of this Treasury building. So they're taking massive amounts of casualties. So as a result of that, what they're going to do is a Lance Corporal is going to walk up to Captain Ron Christmas, and he's going to say, hey, I got an idea. He goes, we've got NVA on both sides of us. If I took that mechanical mule that has that recoilless rifle attached to it, I could drive it down the street, and then when I fired it, the back blast would take care of anybody behind me, and that front blast would punch through the Treasury building. Ron Christmas said, well, that's good, except you'll be out in the open the entire time. And they're firing like heavy concentrations of fire down that road. Lance Corporal says, I still think I can do it. So Ron Christmas tells him to get to work. At the same time, Ernie Cheatham is skirting this road, and he's looking down there, and he's kind of in a blind spot. And every time the machine guns from the NVA are sweeping back and forth, it would rise over his head. So he realizes that there is some kind of obstruction in the way of that machine gunner. So as that mechanical mule and that Lance Corporal, because it's a 2-man crew, as they're driving down the road, Ernie Cheatham tells them, I'm going to fire 2 tracer rounds into that Treasury building. I want you to put that recoilless round right through this thing. This is a big bazooka round. So he gets out there, and every indication is you would have thought it was just a training exercise. The crew chief tells them, load the recoilless rifle. And this is all out in the open. They're loading it up. There is a 50 caliber rifle on top of this recoilless rifle, and it's a spotter. So before you fire that big round, you're going to fire that 50 caliber round to spot where you're going. So between Ernie Cheatham and this crew, they finally get the exact spot that they want to put that round right through. They fire it, and that is ultimately what's going to break the backs of the NVA in the Treasury building. So the same day inside the Citadel, at this point, the ARVN, because of their reinforcements, they're going to outnumber the NVA. Okay? So outside of the city, coming from Camp Evans, Colonel Dick Sweet and 2nd Battalion, 12th Cavalry Regiment this is going to be their area of operation from LZ Sally all the way northward down to the backside of the Citadel and all the way up to the Perfume River. They're the only Army unit that is going to be pressed into service there by the city of Way. So he's taking this very, very seriously, and he knows that if he fails, then it's going to make the Army look really bad. So immediately the wounded are starting to pile up, creating a manpower shortage. In 1968, if you were wounded 2 times and you received 2 Purple Hearts, the 3rd time you're wounded, you go home. There's no questions asked. Doesn't matter what kind of shortage there is, you go home. As a result of that, many of these men in 1-1 and 2-5 are going to start ignoring their wounds. They will go to their corpsmen, they will patch them up the best they can, stitch them up, bandage them, and they will put them back in the fight because these guys were so desperate not to leave their buddies. That's one of the things that you just never hear about. Ken Burns did a documentary on Vietnam several years ago. He didn't talk about this kind of selflessness. He talked about politics, which shame on him, because it should have been about the fighting man in Vietnam. It should have been about that lived experience. On February 6, 1968, the night before that night, Lieutenant Colonel Ernie Cheatham is going to pull all of his company commanders together, and he's going to tell them, tomorrow we're going to attack the provincial administration building, and I want that flag ripped down. I want that flag. So the next morning at 04:30, they're all going to take off. They start their advance. They secure that building by 1603. Think about how many, this is like right down the road. Think about the amount of casualties and everything these guys are getting because it's in the urban warfare. As soon as they secure this building, Captain Ron Christmas is standing there and he says, get me an American flag. He puts the American flag up. There's a CBS News crew there. They start taking pictures of it and they're like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. And he goes, well, my men, they need a morale lifter. So he does it. He then reports back to Ernie Cheatham and he tells him, hey, we just took the administrative building, just so you know. Just to let you know, I raised the American flag. This is illegal. Can't do it. We were there as advisors to the South Vietnamese. So this was an illegal act. So when Ernie Cheatham reports it back to Headquarters Marine Corps, he starts this conversation with, hey, we took the administrative building. Somehow the American flag got raised. I don't know how. So they're going to have a real good talk with Ernie Cheatham and tell him it never happens again. It didn't slow down Ron Christmas's advancement to Lieutenant General, I can tell you that. Chuck Meadows rose to the rank of Colonel. Everybody else there became at least a Brigadier General. So I don't know what happened to Chuck. So on February 6, 1968, because of the advancement that Gulf 2-5 is going to make, they're able to actually go into reserve at that point. February 7th, inside of the Way University, they're now dealing with 5,000 refugees. So not only are you still in the fight of your life to kick the North Vietnamese out, but you've got 5,000 people you've got to take care of. So they've got a real problem on their hands. This is a picture right here. So from January 30th, 1968 through February 7th, this is 2-5's progress, everything in that red. We're only talking 8 blocks. That's quite a bit of fighting. The pictures here are the original pictures from when 2-5 is raising the flag there. So inside of the city, they finally have a unit who can go in there and start helping them clear the inside of the ancient city of Way. They have a Captain Bob Thomas, Major Bob Thompson from 1-5 and his operations officer, and they are ordered into the 1st ARVN Division's headquarters. They are going to be taking CH-46, which is great big helicopters. As they are flying into the ARVN headquarters division, they are hit. They are going into a very hot LZ. One of the helicopters that is carrying B Company is hit, and the pilot is wounded severely. As a result of that, the co-pilot's going to pull it out. He's saying, I got to go back to Phu-Bai. He goes all the way back to Phu-Bai. They medevac and take the pilot to the hospital. And now B Company is sitting there with no ride to get back to the ancient city of Wei. So as a result of that, they're going to wait until dark, and then they're going to hump all the way from Fubai Airport through some really scary country into the ancient city of Wei. They're eventually going to make it by sunup. And if you look at this map here, what you've got here is the city is cut diagonally in half. So this is the Arvin division here. This is the runway. So this is the dividing line right here. And if you see where the 4th Arvin division is, those guys they're a 4th Arvin Airborne Division. They're supposed to be holding that area so the NVA cannot push any further through there. And then as 2-5 comes up online, they're supposed to pull out. Well, what they discover is as 2-5 is pulling up to make that fight, there's no Arvin there. The NVA didn't even know it. So as a result of that, the NVA are able to really dig in there quite strong. So on February 13th at 0800, the assault inside the Citadel is going to begin. 1-5 is learning the same lessons that 2-5 and 1-1 had. They are not prepared for urban warfare. The problem is this building was made back in 1802. So the roads, the alleyways are very, very narrow. And they all open up. If you look at this map, this is all kind of park area. And all of these narrow streets are right in here. They're probably 8 feet wide. They make these great avenues of approach for the NVA. So they can actually consolidate their men in front of those roads because there's no fancy envelopment maneuvers that these guys can do in there. Everything that they do has got to be a head-on frontal assault, and all they're able to use is M16s and M60s. So there's going to be hand-to-hand combat. It is really a nasty fight. Let me see. Come back. So 2-5 and 1-1 across the river are going to start clearing everything from the Perfume River and the Fukam Canal all the way back to the Ankou Bridge. So they're going to clear all of that new city now and kick the NVA out of there. They're going to secure all that area so they can get supplies in and out of there quickly. They can also start bringing reinforcements in as they're able to. Once inside of the Citadel, 2-5 gets to work. All the NVA positions within the Citadel, the Imperial City, could only be fired upon by the Arvin units with 155s and everything. So this is really, really a horrible battle. Over by where the Arvin Division headquarters are, on that side of the ancient city palace, they can blow that stuff up. Some of those walls are still missing. They still got big holes in them today because they wanted people to see what happened there. On the other side, it is all just trying to push those walls over and move forward. The resistance was so hard that on February 15th, all of 1-5 companies were on or beyond the line of departure that were supposed to pass on February 13th, 1968. On February 15th, the Dongba Gate is overrun by 1-5. The NVA are able to regroup very quickly. They then come back and quickly retake the Dongba Bridge. This gate is going to trade hands several times, a lot of hand-to-hand combat. Finally, in the morning of the next day, 1-5 is going to climb up onto the ramparts, which are all barricaded, and they're going to be climbing over those barricades at the same time that the other half of 1-5 is coming up from the bottom of the gate. They're eventually going to be able to kick the NVA out of there, and they take the Dongba Gate for the last time, and they hold it. On the other side of the Citadel, you've got the Vietnamese Marine Corps, who is now in the fight for their life heading toward the Citadel. And what they start discovering is that all of the civilians that lived inside of that Citadel are now being executed. Because now it's becoming very clear to the NVA, these people aren't going to uprise with us and fight against this puppet government. So they're going to just destroy these people. That very next morning on February 16th, 1-5 is going to intercept a message from the replacement commanders of the NVA, and they're talking about how, man, we are losing our butts here and we are losing ground. We are going to lose our escape route out of one of these gates. Is there any way that we can pull out and regroup outside of the gates? The NVA commanders tell them, no, you are going to stand there in the citadel and you're going to fight. So as they close in on the palace walls, once again, they're being funneled into these avenues of approach, and they're taking huge, huge casualties. By dusk on February 20th, 1-5 had sustained 47 Marine and corpsmen dead, 240 Marine and corpsmen wounded, and 60 Marines and corpsmen wounded and returned to duty. Nobody has any idea how many men just ignored their wounds and just kept fighting because they didn't want to be sent home. It starts turning decidedly political at this time as well, because it is moving so slow inside of the citadel. General Cushman, who's in charge there in Way, gives an interview to a bunch of reporters, and he tells them how unhappy he is with Major Bob Thompson. He tells them, man, this guy's moving too slow. He's not aggressive enough, not doing what he's supposed to do. I think I'm going to replace him. That interview is being conducted live, and Bob Thompson's wife is watching it back in Washington, in their home country, in their home city. So she immediately writes a letter to Bob Thompson. I'm so sorry you've lost your command. I just saw the interview from General Cushman. So General Cushman goes to Colonel Stan Hughes and he says, I need you to replace this guy. He's not doing the job he's supposed to do. And Stan Hughes tells him, I will resign my commission and my position before I take over for that man. He said, you need to look at how many casualties he's taking in right now and what he has to fight with. As a result of that, Cushman takes a really, really close look at what is going on there, and they decide he has to have reinforcements. So on February 22nd, the air is finally starting to clear a little bit. They have a ceiling of 1,500. So they believe that they can get some air support in there. So they call in 2 A4s. An 01 pilot is flying around there, and he calls the A4s in from Chulai. They drop down below 1,500 feet, and he tells them, I'm going to drop green smoke over the location where the NVA are. I want you to come in and do 2 rounds, and I want napalm drop down on these guys. So the A4s come down at 100 feet over the ancient city of Way. They're traveling at 350 miles an hour, and they drop those napalm canisters right directly on top of the NVA. They're then ordered to come back around, do another one. The pilot of the 01 observation plants was Terrence Bozarth, First Lieutenant Terrence Bozarth. He is then killed on the second round of that. As they are trying to drop some more green smoke in there, he is mortally wounded, which means that Captain Bob Laramie, who is the infantry officer in the other seat, has to try to fly the plane. The engine is completely shot out, and it drops pretty quickly. They crash on the outside of the citadel next to one of the moat canals, and he is very quickly, because he's in the NVA area, an ARVIT unit comes out and grabs him and then brings him into safety. They also collect the pilot, and they're able to get them both out of there. This is ultimately what's going to break the back of the NVA for the Battle of Way. The Marines are able to take the Thong Tu Gate eventually after that. Major Bob Thompson he then approaches a commander for an ARVIT unit, and he says, get that flag down right now and get the South Vietnamese flag up there. And the commander tells him, I'm not going out there. There's still too much firing going on. And he goes, you raise the flag. And that's when Bob Thompson tells him, we already got in trouble once raising a flag, and we were told we can't do it again. So eventually that flag is going to be brought down. The large NLF flag is removed on February 24th. The next day, the last corner of the citadel is finally secured, and on February 26th, 1968, the city of Wei is finally declared secured inside of the citadel. Questions? I told you guys about the Globe and Laurel restaurant. It was always really, really cool to be able to go in there and, you know, buy these guys a drink and just learn. I became very good friends with Major Rick Spooner, and he called me up one day on a Saturday. We used to go in there. He would write a chapter of his book, and there were like 5 or 6 of us that he considered to be his advisors. And he would read us the chapter of the book he had written that week, and we would critique it, kinda, and then tell him what we thought of what he had written. And it was always like, oh man, that's the best writing I've ever heard. But I got a call from Rick one time, and he said, Sean, you coming in today? And I go, yeah. He said, what time you coming in? I said, 5. He said, come in at around 4. I got something I want to introduce you to. So I come walking into his restaurant, and he had like a little patio where you could go smoke cigars in the back, and he called it his CP. And I walked back, he was talking to this little old guy and this little old wife. And I was just standing back there waiting for him to finish up. And he goes, oh, here he is, Sean. Sean, come here. This is John Glenn. John Glenn, this is Sean Drost. He's a good friend of mine. It was an amazing place. What we are trying to recreate with AHP is a place where young people have really good role models through history. We want to be able to pass these stories on because they're not getting taught about American exceptionalism in our schools today. There is just too much nonsense going on. There's too much noise. So what we really want to do, Rich and I are getting ready to leave in 2 weeks to take 3 high schools to Normandy. And this is our 4th year, I believe it is, 4th or 5th year that we've done this. So, you know, we're hoping that we can grow this program. We're hoping that we're able to make this a successful venture. And hopefully, if you guys could pass the word for us, we would certainly appreciate it. Thank you for your time and putting up with me. And I hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you, Sean, very much. Wasn't that a great job, huh? Thanks for serving our country as you did, but also he's still serving. He's actually the president of the Chosen Few, the National Korean Organization, Korean War Organization. He's the actual president. Now he's having to be the treasurer.
Shows you how old they're getting.
Anyways, he took it over to help them out, and so he does a great job. Okay, here's where we're at. We're done for, obviously, the morning session, so we all have to clear out of here. Everybody has to clear out of here until they're going to lock the doors, and they're going to redo the whole, all the tables, okay, for tonight's function. So, again, at 5:30, we'll have a cash bar out here. So be here at 5:30 for the cash bar, and we'll see you tonight.